Hey guys, tonight we begin in a place most people would rather forget, though. Unfortunately, many didn't get the chance. You're standing in a medieval village square, but not as a curious passerby. No, tonight you're the main attraction. Before you can even take a breath, the cold iron closes around you. You're forced into a cage too narrow to sit, too short to stand. Your limbs poke awkwardly through the bars, dangling like broken marionette strings. The metal bites at your skin where it rubs raw. There's no floor, just air beneath your feet, and no roof except the sky. A few peasants pass by, some staring, others pretending not to. One boy throws a turnip. It's not even ripe. This friend is coffin torture, named not because you're dead yet, but because you will be slowly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The iron cage is technically called a gibbet, a sort of open-air coffin for the living used widely across Europe from the 13th century onward. Originally designed to display the bodies of executed criminals, it eventually evolved into a punishment of its own, a slow, agonizing death that stretched out over days. Not weeks. No one lasted weeks. You don't just hang there and pass away peacefully. The days are hot, the nights cold. Your limbs swell and throb. Every joint aches from suspension. The sun scorches your scalp during the day, and in the evening it gets worse. Because that's when the birds come. You don't need to imagine the crows. They're already here. First they circle, then they perch, then they pick, peck, tear. They go for the soft bits first. Your lips, your eyes, anywhere the skin is tender and thinnest. It's said that one unfortunate thief in Flanders lasted nearly 4 days. You, however, aren't likely to break the record. The townsfolk treat your slow decay as a sort of passing entertainment. Children dare each other to run underneath. Vendors set up nearby for convenience. Porridge and a peak, they say, a 2 for 1. Some scholars argue this wasn't always fatal. In rare cases, the prisoner might be removed after a day or two, especially if they had powerful friends or if their crime was deemed light treason, which apparently existed, like diet betrayal, but more often than not, you weren't getting out. The cage was bolted shut and suspended high on a wooden post out of reach for escape, but not for vultures. And if the birds didn't get you, the weather did. Exposure was merciless. One moment you're sweating like a hearthkeeper, the next you're shivering so hard your teeth sound like dice. Modern historians still argue whether gibbeting alive was more for punishment or deterrence. The line blurs when you're the one inside the iron coffin. And here's a charming detail: in some places they left you up after death. For months. Years. Until your bones rattled in the wind, like wind chimes made by someone with anger issues. In England, the body of pirate William Kidd was left hanging in a gibbet over the Thames for more than 20 years. Sailors used it as a navigational landmark. Just turn right at the pirate skeleton. Fringe records from southern France describe regional variants. Some cages had spikes on the inside to prevent you from resting your back. One variation involved a slow winch that lowered and raised the prisoner depending on how merciful or bored the town guards were feeling. Torture on a dimmer switch? Dimmer. You might be wondering, what could a person possibly do to deserve this? Well, let's see. Theft. Smuggling. Blasphemy. Harboring someone who did commit theft, smuggling, or blasphemy. The bar was low, but once you were in that cage, the law had done its work and the sky took over. The open air was your ceiling. The birds were your ceiling fans. The judgment of God was just ambient noise now. Time passes differently in the gibbet. Hours feel like centuries. You try to shift your weight, but there's nowhere to go. The cage creaks. Your ribs protest. Your mind begins to wander. Why is it called coffin torture if it's not closed? What would a closed version even feel like? A lot of people ask that question later. The Iron Maiden would eventually answer it. But that's for another night. For now, as the sky turns orange and the shadows lengthen, you remain suspended. Somewhere between punishment and poetry. Between justice and spectacle. Between the last breath and the next crow. You aren't the first to die this way. You won't be the last. But you will be remembered for a while anyway. The blood has long since rushed to your head. You're hanging upside down, ankles lashed together with coarse rope, your arms flailing somewhere in the sky above you. Your breath comes in short bursts, shallow and panicked. Because this is not just a strange village tradition. You've been sentenced to one of the most horrifying execution methods to ever pass as justice the saw. You feel the coarse wood of the makeshift frame beneath your back, the way it scrapes against your spine as gravity pulls everything downward. Someone shouts. You think it's your name, but it might just be the executioner calling for a sharper blade. And then you hear the unmistakable rasp of metal dragged across metal. They're sharpening the saw. Not quickly either. Slowly, like they want everyone in the crowd to feel it. It's a theater, and you're center stage. The saw execution is not a swift punishment. That's the point. The victim, let's be clear, is hung upside down so that the brain remains flushed with blood, ensuring full consciousness for as long as possible. This wasn't about death. It was about watching you endure death. Big difference. The executioner begins at the groin. Always the softest part, the easiest to cut. The saw sinks in with the weight of its own motion, and you feel it not as a slice but as pressure. Deep, dragging pressure. It doesn't hurt yet, it feels, that's worse. Historians still argue whether this was ever used as a common punishment or simply folklore amplified by fear. But accounts from 16th century Spain, Ottoman Turkey, and even medieval Hungary suggest it wasn't just rumor. The saw was real. The screams even more so. A fringe document from an early 1400s Bavarian monk describes an execution so botched the victim lasted nearly 30 minutes after the saw reached his diaphragm. He did not scream after that, the monk writes, but his eyes watered in such a way that all nearby thought it was raining from the soul. You won't last that long, not because you're weak, but because you're unlucky. The crowd is smaller today, and the executioner's in a hurry. Maybe he's cold. Maybe he has a dinner to get to. Maybe he just doesn't like the way you looked at his daughter last spring. Whatever the reason, the blade moves faster. A quick aside, while many assume this punishment was limited to commoners, there are recorded cases of nobles being subjected to the saw. In one case, a disgraced French baron was sawed from shoulder to hip. Diagonal, artistic. The note in the ledger reads simply, "For blasphemy, also taxes." There's no real way to prepare for being sawed alive. But there is something morbidly calming in the way the body reacts. As the spine nears, you feel your muscles start to release. Not from relief, from surrender. By now, the blood has stopped pooling in your head. Because there's no blood left to pool. Your final thoughts come not as words, but as textures. The scratch of rope on your ankles, the hiss of breath escaping someone else's throat, the sticky sweetness of ripe figs last summer. Do you regret the crime? Probably, but not in the way the judges hoped. The saw was not meant to make you a better person, just a quieter one. And as the final cut is made, the blade finally emerging through your chest like some horrible resurrection trick gone wrong, you are quiet. The crowd disperses slowly. One man claps. He'll tell this story to his grandchildren one day. How he saw someone sawed, how you barely made a sound, how it wasn't as bloody as he thought it would be, and somehow that made it worse. In some corners of Europe, they said that being sawed alive cleansed the soul, that the final scream opened a door to redemption. But redemption was never the point. Only silence. You smell smoke before you feel the heat. It curls upward in lazy ribbons, thick and greasy, with something distinctly wrong in it, like burned parchment soaked in oil and just a hint of roasted pork. You're not near a hearth, though. You're inside one, or rather beneath one. The air is stifling, trapped within a bronze chamber shaped like a beast, its sides smooth and gleaming, crafted in the image of a mighty bull, its mouth slightly open in an eternal roar. Only this bull doesn't move. It sits atop a stone platform, and inside it is you. This is the brazen bull. A punishment so creative it teeters into performance art. According to legend, it was invented in ancient Greece, but made appearances in medieval torture collections because, well, people never could resist reviving the classics. You lie curled in the belly of the beast. It's cramped, and the metal is already warm to the touch. Someone outside, maybe the priest, maybe the executioner, shouts something you can't hear. You hear wood pile up around the bull's feet, the sound of flint and steel, then a roar not from the bull but from the fire. The belly begins to heat. The floor under your back gets sticky with sweat before it becomes impossible to touch. Then the sides, then the ceiling. You're slow roasting from all directions now. The bull was designed to make death dramatic. A system of pipes inside its head transformed human screams into what sounded like a bellowing animal. So, to those outside, you're no longer a person. You're a beast in agony, a legend, a warning. Historians still argue whether the brazen bull was ever used widely or just a myth crafted for maximum effect. The first mention traces back to a man named Perillos, who supposedly invented the bull, and was then the first man roasted in it courtesy of the tyrant Phalaris. Poetic justice with a crispy finish. But there's some archaeological whisperings that suggest metallic effigies like this existed in medieval Sicily, possibly as punishment for heretics or political traitors. The fire was, as always, the equalizer. Inside, you try not to move. Your skin is already blistering, and even the tiniest shift scrapes layers off against the furnace walls. The air is unbreathable, thick metallic and full of ash. You want to scream, but you can't. Your mouth is dry, your throat raw, but you do scream. Eventually. Because you're not just cooking, you're performing. And your audience loves it. There's a note in a 14th century French ledger that a brazen beast was used during a public execution in Montpellier. No names, no crimes. Just a simple comment from a clerk. It moaned most convincingly. A fringe theory suggests that the inside of the bull might have been lined with incense so that the smoke would smell sweet during execution. Others think it's nonsense. But either way, you're not sniffing lavender. Someone laughs outside. You hear coins jingling? Maybe they're betting on how long you'll last. Inside, the bull time melts with you. You don't know if it's been minutes or hours. You've lost the ability to separate sensation from imagination. Maybe you're not in a bull. Maybe you're in a dragon. Maybe this is just how the world ends, one scream at a time. Eventually, the metal cools. Your voice fades, and the bellow from the pipes turns into nothing more than a thin, whistling wheeze. They'll open the door eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. And what's left inside will be blackened, curled, and brittle. But not forgotten. People remember fire. It burns itself into memory as much as into flesh. The brazen bull didn't just kill, it converted pain into music, flesh into story, and people into myths. And now you're part of that story. You're kneeling. You don't remember when you got there, but your legs are folded beneath you, trembling. Two men flank you, one on each side, each holding something long and metallic in their gloved hands. There's a low hum in the chamber, not from any machine, but from the sound of breath. Not yours. Theirs? Waiting. They bring it forward. It's small, really. Harmless looking at first glance. A set of two flat iron bars studded with pyramid-shaped spikes facing inward. At the ends are large threaded screws turning handles rusted but functional. The inside edge gleams faintly, worn by use. The knee splitter. You're not tied down. Yet. That's the part that unnerves you. You're expected to comply. Maybe they know what you did. Or maybe you don't even need to be guilty. Inquisition logic works like that confession first, evidence optional. You shift. Just a little. Enough for one of the men to step forward. The cold iron clamps around your right knee. Perfect fit. As if it had been made for you. As if they'd measured you in your sleep. Now the jokes begin. This will only hurt until it doesn't, one of them says dryly. His partner grins, and then slowly, almost ceremonially, he begins to turn the screw. The knee splitter was rarely used to kill. No, it was far more refined than that. Its purpose was mutilation confession, or permanent incapacitation. Once those iron jaws bit down, they crushed ligaments, cartilage, tendons, and bones, all with a slow, deliberate squeeze. Historians still argue whether it originated in Spain or Italy, but by the 16th century, variations appeared across Central Europe, especially in areas where heresy trials ran hot. Think of it as the early modern knee replacement, minus the replacement part. As the device tightens, the spikes sink deeper into the sides of your joint. First, it's pressure, then sharpness, then a sickening crunch as the inner structure of the knee begins to rupture. And you're still conscious for all of it. There's a record from the court of Philip II of Spain detailing a noblewoman accused of consorting with Moorish rebels. She underwent 3 rounds with the knee splitter and survived, though she never knelt for the Eucharist again. You can't focus on history now, not while your kneecap is screaming. The iron jaws don't just squeeze, they collapse. Imagine a slow stomp from a steel boot that never lifts. You can feel the bone fragmenting, splintering into jagged shards that slice from within. You taste copper on your tongue. One of the men asks you something. You don't remember what. It doesn't matter. It's not a real question. The screw turns again. And now your leg is shaking. Your whole body trembles from the pain. Your mind wants to pass out, but your instincts won't allow it. Your eyes blur. For a moment, you imagine you're outside. The sun is shining. You're walking through wheat. There's a stream nearby. Snap! Back to reality. The entire joint buckles. The iron has met iron, and there's nothing left in between but pulp. Your knee, what was your knee, is flattened. Nerve endings fire off like a lightning storm, and you finally scream. Someone behind you exhales. That was the sound they were waiting for. You beg. Not with words, your mouth is too full of sobs. You beg with your posture, with the slump of your shoulders, the tilt of your broken body. Mercy becomes a shape, not a sentence. They discuss switching to the other knee. Someone shakes their head. This one's talked enough. But you didn't say anything. Not yet. A fringe tidbit for you. In some regions, the knee splitter was used after sentencing not to extract confession, but to make a criminal unfit to flee. That's the phrase. Imagine limping your way to freedom, each step driven by jagged splinters. Some versions of the device were even heated before use, turning the spike tips white hot. There's a debate among specialists whether this was for intimidation or to cauterize the wound. Either way, it didn't help. Your vision fades now. You're lying down somehow. Someone must have lowered you, or maybe you just tipped over like a tree that finally gave up its roots. Pain still lives in your knee, but the edges are dulling. The screams come from a distance now, like they belong to someone else. The room smells of iron and something else. You realize it's not the tool, it's you. You won't walk again, not today, maybe not ever. But you did give them what they wanted, even if you don't know what it was. The rope creaks as it lowers you inch by agonizing inch. Your arms are tied tightly behind your back wrists, twisted and bound together so securely that your shoulders scream before you even leave the ground. But you're not standing anymore. Your feet have been pulled off the floor. You hang suspended, dangling like a forgotten marionette from a high wooden beam. And beneath you, a pointed wooden pyramid. This is the Judas cradle, a punishment so quiet, so patient, that it almost feels polite. Until gravity joins the conversation. Your entire body weight bears down on the narrow tip of that wooden spike, positioned squarely beneath your most vulnerable point, either the base of the spine, the anus, or the genitals. You don't get to pick. That decision was made for you, probably by someone smiling. And the rope, it's not there to support you, it's there to guide you downward. The Judas cradle, also called the culla di Giuda in Italy, was a triangular device used primarily during the late medieval Inquisitions. Its structure was deceptively simple, a tall pyramid-shaped seat mounted on a sturdy base, often with a pulley system to control descent. You're not dropped, you're lowered, slowly, carefully, painstakingly. Because the goal isn't to kill you, it's to tear you apart. But gently. The pressure builds minute by minute. The sharp point begins to press upward, pressing deeper as your body weight surrenders to fatigue. Your muscles quiver, trying to stay tense, to lift yourself even just a little to delay that inevitable settling. But muscles tire. Rope stretches. And you descend. A little more. And a little more. You feel the pyramid begin to enter, not like a blade, not with a cut, but with an insistent splitting push. There's no wound, not yet. Just pressure that starts at skin and creeps inward. A pressure that multiplies, that demands, that violates. Inquisitors believed that this method left fewer visible marks. It was ideal for extracting confessions without leaving permanent scars, at least externally. The internal damage, though, that stayed. Historians still argue whether this was truly used to full effect or merely designed as a tool of fear. Very few primary records mention it explicitly. Most come from 17th century manuals referencing earlier practices, but wood doesn't lie. Some surviving devices remain their tips blackened from use, stained by time, or worse. A quirky detail if you're up for it, some variants of the Judas cradle were oiled before use. not to ease the pain, but to ensure the spike didn't splinter. Clean entry, messy exit. Some even say the pyramids were carved with grooves to channel blood or other fluids. You try to lift yourself again just an inch. Your back arches, abs screaming, shoulders shrieking under the tension of your own desperation. But the rope above holds steady, and your strength falters. You sink again. And this time the point enters fully. A sob escapes before you can bite it back. It's not just pain, it's invasion. It's the feeling of your body betraying you of bone and muscle, trying to part ways like strangers avoiding eye contact. One of the hooded figures watches you without a word. Another writes something in a book. You wonder what they'll say. Subject showed resistance. Subject uncooperative. Subject cried. You'd tell them anything now. Anything they want. You try to speak, but your voice comes out in fragments, whispers, chased by tremors. It takes a minute to form words. Another minute to mean them. By the time the spike presses against something inside you that refuses to move, that hurts, to move the rope is already sagging further. There's a story probably apocryphal of a prisoner who survived the Judas cradle for nearly 24 hours. They kept hoisting him up, letting him rest, then lowering him again, over and over, until his body split open like wet bark. They say he confessed to 37 crimes. He only committed one, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But in medieval justice, that was more than enough. Eventually, the pain blurs. It ceases to be pain and becomes geography, a burning, twisting sense of where you are in your own body. A map made from fire and humiliation. You'll walk away, maybe, but you'll never sit right again. That's the part they don't write down. It starts with a chair. A simple thing. Wood and iron, squat and ugly. You're seated in it now, well, not seated exactly. More like crammed, spine-crooked hands bound tightly behind your back. And in front of you, a metal contraption that looks like a medieval sandwich press built by someone who really didn't like faces. This is the head crusher, and yes, it does exactly what it says. There's a thick steel cap above your head and a hard iron bar under your chin. At first, it just sits there heavy but manageable, like a too-snug helmet. The executioner stands behind you. His hand rests on a long screw handle sticking out like a tail from the top of the device. Then, with the sound of ancient metal grinding against itself, he turns it. There's pressure. Of course there's pressure. At first, it's almost manageable, a tight squeeze on your skull. A reminder that something terrible is about to happen. But then, with every quarter turn of the screw, the upper plate descends. Slowly, irrevocably, and suddenly your jaw feels like it's been replaced with gravel. The pain pulses through your teeth, into your sinuses, and then down your spine like molten lightning. Your ears pop. Your vision blurs. Every nerve in your face sends out an urgent distress call. The head crusher was used primarily for confessions, especially in Spain and parts of the Holy Roman Empire where inquisitors were known for their creativity. It was favored because it left the rest of the body intact. A neat torture if such a thing exists. Historians still argue whether the device was ever used to its fatal limit, or if it was only turned far enough to inflict unbearable pain. But forensic studies on surviving models suggest it could, and probably did, shatter the jaw, crush the teeth into powder, and in some cases fracture the skull entirely. You try to scream, but your tongue has nowhere to go. Your mouth is locked in a silent, trembling gape. The iron bar beneath your chin digs deeper into the soft tissue, threatening to sever your windpipe. Blood trickles from your gums, thin and metallic. One more turn. The pressure behind your eyes becomes unbearable. You feel them bulge. Not metaphorically, literally. The fluid pressure in your skull has nowhere to escape. The crushing plates force it inward, and now your vision is flickering, strobing like a candle guttering in a drafty hallway. The man behind the machine hums, a simple tune, something folksy. You hate him, but more than that, you hate this machine. Because it's impersonal, it doesn't shout or strike. It just squeezes. There's a record from a 15th century inquisitor's log in Vienna describing a prisoner who endured 7 full turns before blacking out. When he awoke, his jaw was shattered in 3 places, and 2 of his molars had embedded in his nasal cavity. He confessed immediately after. To everything, even things he didn't do. Especially things he didn't do. And here's a quirky little detail. In some regions, the head crusher was adorned with religious symbols, a crucifix, a Latin motto, Veritas per cruciatum, truth through torment. Because if the pain doesn't purify you, the iron will. You feel the next turn. You hear it even if your ears have gone numb. It's a heavy sound like a cathedral door creaking open. And just for a moment, you think this is it. Your thoughts are starting to unravel. Even memories have trouble forming when your brain is under siege. Then something changes. They stop. The handle halts. The man behind you sighs. A word is whispered. You're not sure what it is, but your head slumps forward, a ruined mask of what it once was. Your jaw hangs loose now, unhinged and misshapen. Your tongue lies heavy like meat. You breathe only through your nose. That is, if the swelling allows it. The chair is quiet again. So are you. And that's the point. You were never supposed to die here, just to break. And break you did. The air smells like iron and salt. But not the kind that stings your nose at the sea. No, this salt is thicker, mineral metallic. It clings to the back of your throat and lines your gums. Your skin is slick with it despite the chill in the room. You're naked from the waist-up belly pressed to the damp stone floor, and someone is standing over you with a knife. But the knife isn't meant to kill you. It's meant to peel. This is flaying the ancient art of removing skin, while keeping everything else heartbreakingly intact. You shudder, not from cold, from knowing. Flaying dates back to ancient empires. Assyrians, Persians, even early Chinese dynasties. But medieval Europe preserved the practice in more private corners behind castle walls and religious dungeons, anywhere a lord or bishop wanted obedience without the fuss of a hanging. The skin, after all, is the body's largest organ, and the easiest one to read. Remove it, and the person underneath is exposed in every possible sense. The man with the knife begins at your shoulder, always there. It's the thinnest. He makes the first incision shallow at first, like he's testing you, like he's slicing parchment. You don't cry out yet. You just grip the floor. You listen to the leather creak on his gloves. You feel blood trickle slowly down your side, warm and oddly comforting. Then the knife tilts and the real cutting begins. Historians still argue how often full-body flaying was actually completed. Some claim it was more commonly threatened than carried out. Others cite execution records from 14th century France, where skinning alive was the formal sentence for attempted regicide. Either way, the act was designed not just to punish, but to erase. There's an infamous legend of a thief in the Rhineland who was flayed and his skin nailed to the town gate. The town called it a human warning sign. But right now you're not thinking about history. You're thinking about the way the knife glides beneath your skin, separating it from the muscle like the peel from an overripe fruit. It doesn't feel sharp anymore, it feels slow. Like your body is turning into something else, something separate from your mind. One of the attendants swabs the area with a cloth. Not to clean, just to see how much blood they've lost. Your back is next. The knife carves downward like a map maker outlining rivers. You feel each tiny tug as the layers are pulled away, and still you live. That's the trick of flaying. You survive long enough to feel everything. There's a fringe account from a monastery in Toulouse where a monk recorded a criminal surviving nearly 2 hours of partial flaying before death. He died not from shock, but from exposure. Imagine that. Your body cooling from the inside out because your skin, your barrier, your armor was gone. They work their way around your ribs now, careful not to nick too deep. They want the muscles intact. After all, this is an art form. Too fast and you die. Too slow and you faint. Timing is everything. You try to turn your head to see anything, anyone, but your face is pressed flat to the stone. Your breath fogs on the surface. You count the fogs. 1, 2, 3. At some point, your pain starts to smear. It blends into a single overwhelming heat. You stop distinguishing between cut and burn, between nerve and blood. There's a term for this in medieval medicine, la souffrance bénie, blessed suffering. They believed pain, this profound, cleansed the soul. That a flayed man, if he survived, might reach spiritual purity through agony. You'd like to disagree, but you're too busy trying not to scream. And here's something charming in some towns. The skin of the condemned was turned into warning banners, tanned, stretched, and inked with the words of their confession. One account from Lombardy tells of a judge who had a rebel's skin fashioned into a binding for legal scrolls. Because nothing says obey the law like human leather. At last your breathing slows. You've gone still. The man with the knife pauses. Maybe he's finished. Maybe he's just deciding whether to continue. You don't move. Can't. You're not dead, But you've been undone, and whether you survive or not, you're gone. Your legs are trembling, but not from cold. They're trembling because they can't tell what's worse, the weight already crushing them, or the anticipation of more. You're seated now, knees bent unnaturally, your shins locked inside two iron tubes. The metal is cold at first, but it's the least of your worries. A man steps forward holding a ladle. This isn't a meal. It's molten lead. Welcome to the iron boot, a punishment so brutal it didn't even pretend to be symbolic. No showmanship, no metaphor, just destruction measured in degrees and screams. At first glance, the iron boot might look like oversized armor. It was technically a pair of heavy metal greaves clamped tight around the victim's lower legs. But inside it was lined with grooves and holes. Not for air, for fluid. Because the boot wasn't just meant to crush, it was meant to cook. The fire's lit beneath you now, a brazier of glowing coals set beneath the boots. Already you feel the warmth rising up through your calves. That warmth will soon become unbearable. Then they begin pouring. A thin stream of molten lead or boiling oil or even red-hot pitch, depending on what the town had in stock, drips slowly into the tops of the boots. The liquid hisses as it touches your skin, then gurgles down through the gaps, seeping along the bone. You can't thrash, the boots are locked. Your only option is to scream. So you do. Historians still argue whether the molten pouring variant was commonly used or if most boots simply crushed by gradual pressure. But both versions were designed to destroy the legs utterly, bones, splintered muscles, seared nerves fried beyond recognition. There's a reference in a 15th century French military tribunal to a deserter who was booted with fire until both legs had to be amputated. He lived technically. He just never walked again. But the iron boot wasn't always fatal. In fact, it was often used before sentencing. Think of it as a trial by heat. Confess and the pain might stop. Deny it and the fire just keeps rising. You shift instinctively, trying to pull your legs up. Bad move. The sudden suction of burned flesh against metal sends a whole new wave of agony racing up your spine. Your muscles clench so hard your back arches and your teeth grind down hard enough to chip. The man with the ladle tilts it again. Another splash. You feel it run down your shin pool around your ankle and settle beneath your heel. A monk nearby crosses himself. Here's a strange little detail. In some regions, the boots were lined with spikes before the pouring began. That way, the skin was already torn, the wounds already open. The molten lead didn't just burn the surface, it sank in. Some accounts even describe boots made with removable panels, so the damage could be inspected mid-process. Imagine that someone peeling back a hot iron flap to check whether your tendons had started bubbling yet. They say the pain from boiling metal is unlike anything else. Not sharp, not stabbing, just overwhelming, total, like being dissolved from the inside out. You try to focus on something, anything other than the searing. You think of your village, of your sister's laugh, of that one morning when the frost melted just right on the wheat field and everything glittered like silver. You hold on to that. But silver turns to ash, and your legs are gone. Not literally. Not yet. But they no longer feel like yours. They're columns of fire now, each nerve a violin string played by devils. You sob because that's all that's left. Eventually someone removes the boots. They don't do it gently. The sound of your flesh tearing from the metal echoes off the walls. For a moment the room is silent, awed, almost reverent. Then someone says, "It's done." You lie back. You don't feel the stone floor anymore. Just the ghost of where your legs used to be. The iron boot didn't aim to kill. It aimed to end, to render you useless, broken, and compliant. And in that, it rarely failed. They won't hang you. They won't need to, because you'll never run again. It's a strange thing watching someone approach you with a pair of shears, especially when those shears look like something meant for trimming hedges in hell. Long, rusted, and curved like a bird's beak, the jaws of the device open with a hollow clack that makes your stomach turn. They glint in the torchlight, serrated on the inside, stained dark at the edges. You know what they're for. This is no haircut. This is the crocodile shears, and tonight they belong to you. Your shackled upright arms bound behind your back. The torchlight flickers across stone walls, casting long shadows that stretch toward you like claws. And standing there, expressionless professional, is a man holding the worst tool in the castle's torture collection. The shears are used for one thing, punishing regicides and traitors, specifically male ones. Because the crocodile shears are designed to clamp around a man's most vulnerable appendage. The torturer doesn't make a speech, he He doesn't need to. The room says enough. It's quiet, save for the soft hiss of oil burning in the sconces. The audience is small, perhaps a judge, maybe a bishop, someone with power. This is justice, not entertainment. They bring the shears forward. They're already glowing red. Historians still argue whether the crocodile shears were ever used widely, or if they were reserved solely for the highest betrayals, assassins, conspirators, or failed usurpers. One record from 16th century Bohemia mentions a man who plotted to poison a prince. He was executed in two parts. The first involved the shears. Their jaws were designed to clamp shut and not let go. Once heated in a brazier until glowing, they were fastened around the penis of the condemned. One quick snap, followed by wrenching the tool back violently, often tore the organ away from the body in a single pull. You already know that, because you're the condemned, and the shears are open. They don't hesitate. They don't give you a warning. The metal closes around you with a sizzle, and it's as if your entire body contracts inward, every nerve ending erupting at once. You scream, of course, not because you're trying to, but because you must. The searing pain is instant. It blinds you. Your knees buckle, but you can't fall, not with the shackles holding you upright like a puppet. And then comes the twist. That's the worst part. Because it's not just the burn. It's the tearing the sense of something being wrenched away from your identity, your anatomy, your dignity. You're not being executed, you're being unmade. There's a flick of liquid against your thigh blood or something worse. The crowd doesn't cheer. This isn't a coliseum, it's colder than that. The bishop simply nods. The executioner holds up the shears like a sacred object. The jaw's now closed. So are your eyes. A quirky fact: in some regions, the shears had ornamental crocodile heads engraved along the handles, hence the name. The jaws themselves were often barbed, curved inward to prevent clean removal. There was no surgical precision. That wasn't the goal. And no anesthesia wasn't a thing. The closest you got was unconsciousness, but you're still very, very awake. Some speculate that the crocodile shears were a psychological punishment, more than a legal one, designed to ensure that traitors were remembered not as martyrs, but as mutilated warnings. And oh, they remembered. There's a story of a man in Poland who survived the process barely. He was paraded through the streets afterward, covered but clearly broken. Children pointed. Adults crossed themselves. His name disappeared from history, but his image remained. You won't be paraded. You'll just be left to bleed. They don't bother binding the wound. The body goes into shock on its own. Cold sweat beads across your forehead. Your breath becomes shallow rattling. You hear murmurs. Someone says you might survive. Another bets against it. They lower you now. You don't resist. What's left of you slumps forward gently like a tree felled at last. The shears clatter onto a stone table beside you. Still hot, still open, still ready. But you won't need them again. They've taken what they came for. It starts with a rake. Not the kind you'd use in a garden, though it does have claws. Curved, gleaming, forged iron claws mounted on a handle that feels far too purposeful to be mistaken for anything domestic. They call it the cat's paw, a tool used by inquisitors, torturers, and judges who believe that truth could be clawed out of the human body like weeds from dry soil. And right now, you're the garden. You're chained to a wooden post shirt, torn away the flesh of your back, bare and tense. You hear footsteps, soft ones, and then the metallic clink of the tool being set down briefly on a stone ledge. Someone's warming it. That's the trick. Cold claws hurt, but hot ones blister and stick. The cat's paw, sometimes called the Spanish tickler, was designed to shred. It featured 3 or 4 curved talons, each sharp enough to pierce leather. It wasn't swung like a whip. It wasn't even pulled like tongs. It was dragged slowly, methodically across skin. Your torturer doesn't announce himself. He doesn't need to. The sound of the iron dragging across wood is enough warning. Then it lifts and lands. You feel the claws bite into your shoulder. Not stab, not slice. Rake. Historians still argue whether the cat's paw was used for execution or only as a tool of interrogation. Some claim it was part of larger torture cycles, used in combination with the rack, the strappado, or fire. Others believe it stood alone, meant to extract confessions without leaving obvious injuries, just layers of peeled flesh. There's a documented case in 15th century Florence where a scribe was raked for 12 hours. He confessed to 8 counts of heresy. Only 3 were real. The rest were whatever came to mind between screams. You now understand how that's possible. Because the cat's paw doesn't just tear, it lingers. Your skin comes away in ribbons. At first it's shallow, like a bad scrape, but then it deepens. The second pass finds raw muscle. The third, you feel it catch on ribs, on the jagged edge of you that wasn't meant to see daylight. You scream. Not to stop the pain, it won't. You scream to locate yourself, to remind whatever part of your mind hasn't retreated that you still exist. The man holding the claw leans in. He wants to see your face. He wants to know if you're ready to talk. But the only thing you can say is a choked sob swallowed by your own breath. That's not good enough. He starts again. A fringe account from Prague claims that inquisitors sometimes dip the claws in salt water before use. It wasn't just for infection. It was for memory. The salt burned the wounds after each rake, making the pain linger long after the metal passed. In some variations, the claws weren't even handheld. They were mounted on swinging arms like pendulums, allowing for mechanical consistency. Equal pain, equal confession. You aren't thinking about mechanics. You're thinking about how loud your heartbeat is, how each pulse sends a new shockwave through your mangled back. You can feel your skin hanging loose, wet, and ruined. The stone floor is spotted red beneath you. Someone murmurs. Maybe a scribe. Maybe a monk. They write something down. Subject nearing collapse. You're offered water, not to drink, just enough to keep you awake. Then the claws return. There's no poetry in the cat's paw, no grand symbolism, no metaphors about justice or sin. It's not punishment. It's removal, layer by layer, until all that's left is raw nerve and silence. When the claw finally drops, clinking gently against the floor like a tired tool, you no longer beg. You no longer breathe evenly. You just wait. For the next thing, or for the end. Because you've learned something, haven't you? The truth isn't always found in what's said. Sometimes it's in what's torn away. You don't realize what it is at first. It just looks like a wooden beam. Simple, polished, triangular. Harmless. Then you notice the way it tapers to a sharp, unforgiving edge along the top, like the ridge of a roof. Then you see the ropes. The weights. And then you see where you're meant to sit. This is the wooden horse, a punishment favored for its simplicity, hated for its precision. It doesn't wound you with fire or blade. It breaks you by geometry. And wait, you're lifted gently, almost respectfully, and straddled across the beam. At first, it just feels uncomfortable. A little awkward. The sharp edge presses between your legs, digging into tendons, bruising skin. Then they tie your ankles to either side. Not tightly, just enough to keep you in place. You're still upright. Still whole. Then they bring out the stones. The wooden horse, also known as the chevalet in France, was used across Europe from the late medieval period into the Renaissance. Often employed by military courts, it was a favorite punishment for deserters, insubordination, or theft. Its beauty, if one can call it that, lay in its minimalism. A sharp-edged beam, a victim, some weights, and time. The first weight is tied to your ankles, just a small one. Enough to shift your balance. The edge bites deeper. Muscles clench instinctively. You try to straighten up, but there's nowhere to go. Your thighs burn. Your groin throbs. You feel the wood cutting off circulation. The pressure isn't just pain, it's division. It wants to split you. Historians still argue whether the wooden horse was primarily for punishment or interrogation. Some documents suggest it was used simply to wear down prisoners prior to questioning. Others imply it was used for hours at a time until permanent injury, nerve damage, torn ligaments, infertility. In one Spanish colonial record, it's noted that a man was left on the horse overnight. When he was removed, he could no longer walk. He had been halved, the scribe wrote. Not in body, but in strength. The second weight is added, heavier. You feel your hips shift, involuntarily pulled downward against the blade-like edge. The wooden beam doesn't move, of course. You do. Slowly, inch by inch. The skin between your legs begins to tear, not dramatically, not all at once. Just fibers parting, like fabric that's been pulled too tight. You scream, and no one flinches. A quirky detail: in some towns the beam was greased before use, to make sure the victim slid into place evenly. Others used sand on the surface to increase friction. It depended on the mood of the guards. They sometimes added music, drums, flutes, even hymns, so the crowd wouldn't hear the noises the body made. Bone grinding, flesh tearing. The wet, strange pop of something internal giving way. The third weight is added now. Your hands shake. Your jaw clenches. Your eyes leak tears without asking permission. You try to shift your weight, but the ropes keep your ankles steady. All you can do is slide down. Your body is now divided by the beam. Each half feels like it belongs to someone else. The inner thighs burning, the tailbone bruised beyond description. The groin. You don't ask, you don't want to know, but you know. You remember walking once. Running even. Your legs were strong. You could ride a horse, carry firewood, dance maybe. That's over now. Because the wooden horse remembers. It doesn't cut, it teaches. It instructs your body in the art of collapse, how to surrender, how to break without blood. They remove the weights eventually, but not you. Not yet. You sit in place, shaking broken open, not visibly, not yet, but internally. You will walk again, maybe, but not the same. You'll feel it every time you step, every time you sit. A phantom reminder in your bones and sinew that wood doesn't have to be sharp to destroy, only pointed and patient. There are no ropes this time, no steel, no fire, no spikes or sharpened beams. Just a stone pillar in the center of the square, worn smooth by time and by backs like yours. Your hands are shackled in front of you, barely loose enough to move. They push you forward gently, almost politely, and chain you to the post. One loop of iron at your wrists, one at your ankles. Then they leave. That's it. This is the pillar of shame, and it doesn't bleed you or burn you or pull anything apart. It just leaves you on display. At first, the silence is disorienting. You expect someone to yell, to strike, to spit. But the crowd is quiet today. They don't need to shout. They just watch. The sun is high. Your clothes, what's left of them, hang in tatters. One shoulder exposed, one shoe missing. You're not even sure when it fell off. The ground beneath your feet is cobbled and warm, but the wind is cold. It cuts through your rags with surgical precision, and the stairs begin to sting more than the wind. The pillar of shame was one of the oldest, most universal punishments in the medieval world. Every village had one. Some were carved stone, others rough-hewn wood. They stood at the town's heart near the well, the market, or the church steps, places people had to pass. And that was the point. It wasn't about pain, it was about presence. Your body became a billboard. Your guilt, your sentence, your embarrassment, they were all made physical simply by being seen. You don't know how long they'll leave you here. Hours a day. You try not to count, but each passing moment presses into your spine like a chisel. Historians still argue whether this punishment was more effective for minor crimes or simply more convenient. No guards, no cleanup, just a few loops of iron and public scorn. Theft, gossip, lying, adultery, even lateness to church. The list of offenses was endless and elastic. In one German village, a woman was sentenced to 6 hours at the pillar for unruly laughter during Mass. In another, a man was left in the snow for mocking the miller's baldness. Today, your crime was failing to pay a fine. And now you're here. Cold, exposed, wishing the cobblestones would open up and swallow you whole. A fringe practice in some towns included placards, wooden signs hung around your neck listing your offense. Some were written in Latin, others in crude rhymes. This one lied and took his fee. So now we laugh and he can't flee. A clever punishment because even illiterate villagers could understand a rhyme. Children wander past now. One throws a pebble, another giggles. An old woman spits in your direction but misses. You close your eyes. Pretend you're not here. Pretend this is just a long dream, a strange pause in the day. But your arms ache, and your dignity is leaving faster than the warmth from your fingertips. As the hours crawl on, the sun fades, and then comes the cold. Your limbs tremble involuntarily. The cuffs bite into your wrists. Your ankles swell against the iron rings. The wind picks up, and now there's no one left in the square but you and a stray dog that keeps sniffing your feet. The silence that was peaceful earlier is now heavy, suffocating. You start whispering to yourself. Anything to break the spell. Songs, prayers, names of people you haven't thought about in years. No one hears. No one answers. They'll come for you eventually. Someone always does. Sometimes it's a guard. Sometimes a priest. Sometimes just a child with a key and a message. You may go now, but when they do, it won't matter. Because something already left. Something inside you pried. Certainty voice remains tied to that pillar long after your body is unchained. And that was always the point. You're not gagged, but you wish you were. Because it's your mouth they've come for. Not your arms, not your legs, not even your spine. Just the soft, wet space between your teeth, the part of you that speaks, sings, prays, swears, the part that once whispered secrets or maybe shouted truths best left unsaid, and now it's about to be punished. They bring forward the tongue tier, a cruel little tool that looks like something a blacksmith might use on horseshoes. Two curved pincers narrow at the ends with small hooks on the inside. Delicate, surgical, and very, very personal. Your held still arms bound tightly behind you, knees pressing into the dirt. A hand grabs your hair, jerks your head back. You see a face, but only briefly before your jaw's wrenched open. The iron goes in, and it finds your tongue immediately. The tongue tier was often reserved for those who spoke out against the church, the crown, the mayor, the lord, the law, slanderers, heretics, liars, or sometimes simply those who said the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong tone. Speech was power in the Middle Ages, and this device was designed to strip that power away, literally. Historians still argue whether this was ever standard procedure or only used in extreme cases. Records are inconsistent, perhaps because the victims didn't write their own confessions afterward. A 14th century tribunal in Aragon describes the case of a merchant who spread rumors about the bishop's finances. His punishment, loss of speech in accordance with the insult delivered. They called it poetic justice. You might call it something else, but not out loud. Because as the pincers close around your tongue, the tiny hooks latch onto the soft tissue. The pain is instant, a burning, tearing shock that makes your eyes water. You try to pull back, but the more you fight, the deeper the hooks dig in. Then comes the pull. Not fast, not clean. The tool is twisted slightly. The tongue stretches, twitches, bleeds. You gag on your own breath, and then with a final wrench it comes free. You scream, or try to, but your mouth is full of iron and blood, and the sudden awful absence of something you never realized was so central to your being. A quirky detail. In some towns, the removed tongue was displayed on a nail outside the courthouse, like a warning bell that no longer rang. In others, it was salted and preserved, a kind of grim trophy. Some say priests even burned the tongues of heretics during sermons, tossing them into the flame with a line of Latin meant to cleanse the air. It didn't work. The air still stinks of blood. Your body convulses now more from panic than pain. You can't breathe properly, you can't swallow. You try to cry out, but all that escapes is a wet gargle like someone drowning in a shallow puddle. They wipe the tear clean. They place it back on the wall between the thumb screws and the branding irons. And you're led away, shaky, mute, broken, but alive. That's the trick of it. The tongue tear doesn't kill, it silences. And long after the bleeding stops, long after your body forgets the pressure, the hooks, the final snap, your voice remains missing. Not gone. Just taken. The chair is polished. Its legs are sturdy. It looks almost inviting until you notice the metal spike pointing straight up from the seat. This is the Judas cradle, a name that feels half biblical, half theatrical. But there's nothing abstract about what's about to happen. You're stripped naked, bound at the wrists and ankles, and hoisted by ropes and pulleys. Slowly, deliberately, like a sack of grain at the village mill. Except you're not cargo. You're the performance, and the cradle is your stage. The Judas cradle was a pyramid-shaped device, its point rising up from a stool or platform. Victims were lowered directly onto the spike which penetrated the anus, the vagina, or rarely the base of the spine. It wasn't about depth, it was about duration. A slow descent, a slow impalement. No blades, no fire, just the inexorable pressure of your own body weight doing the work. You feel the tip first. Cold. Geometrically sharp. Then the ropes lower you another inch. Your muscles scream. Not from penetration, not yet, but from the panic of what's coming. Historians still argue how often the Judas cradle was actually used, or whether it was more of a threatened punishment. Some claim it was part of the Inquisition's toolbox. Others argue it became more popular in later centuries, particularly in Italy and Spain. One inquisitor's manual refers to it as the seat of reflective confession, which is a cruel way of saying you'll talk once the point gets high enough. A record from 1481 describes a heretic who sat on the cradle for 3 hours. He gave his confession somewhere between hour 2 and the final scream. You try to rise, but the ropes are tied to counterweights. For every inch you lift your body away from the spike, your arms burn, your shoulders tear. You're holding yourself aloft by sheer will, and gravity always wins. And here's a truly unfun detail: the tip was sometimes oiled beforehand, not for kindness, for cleanliness. The smoother the glide, the less mess. Fewer infections, fewer accidental deaths. Because this wasn't meant to kill you, at least not right away. It was meant to terrify you into obedience. To make your own body the mechanism of your undoing. The spike presses deeper now, millimeter by millimeter. It feels impossibly large, impossibly sharp. It's not stabbing. It's entering like an idea you cannot unthink. Your mind begins to blur. Your legs tremble. Sweat pours from your temples. The ropes creak. Some versions of the cradle were designed to rotate the victim, turning them slightly with every hour. This widened the wound, slowed the healing, and deepened the shame. In especially brutal cases, victims were made to sit again the next day, wounds still raw. It wasn't about truth anymore. It was about breaking time itself, stretching each minute into a century of pain. You're breathing in sharp little gasps now. Your thighs are cramping. Your body shudders with the effort of staying aloft. But you can't stop, because you know the alternative. You've already felt the tip start to split you. Eventually your arms fail. They always do. And the Judas cradle receives you, not with a stab, but with a welcome. Your scream cuts the air like a church bell rung at midnight, loud, sudden, and impossible to ignore. They don't lower you all the way. Not yet. Just enough. They want you to think, to remember, to confess. The cradle never judges. It simply waits. A sharp truth pointed upward. And you are the one who decides how far you fall. The cage is round, too small to lie down, too narrow to stand straight. Just tall enough to spin. They push you in gently as if this were some child's game. But the iron bars creak like teeth when they shut behind you, and the world outside becomes a blur of motion almost immediately. Because now they spin you, and spin you, and spin you. This is the whirligig, and it doesn't rip or burn or bleed. It unravels you from the inside out. The whirligig was deceptively simple. A cylindrical cage suspended or mounted on a post, often human-sized or smaller. Once the prisoner was locked inside, the entire contraption was rotated rapidly like a medieval centrifuge. Punishment by disorientation. But this isn't just a ride gone wrong. It's a methodical breakdown of mind, body, and dignity. Your stomach lurches. Your knees buckle. You brace yourself against the sides, but there's nothing steady to hold. The floor tilts. The ceiling spins. Your eyes water. You swallow hard. And it keeps going. Historians still argue whether the whirligig was used primarily for military discipline or public humiliation. Some describe it as a tool of shame used in town squares to punish gossips, drunks, and deserters. Others say it was used for pure sensory overload, especially in religious institutions where penance was considered a physical experience. One English account from the early 1400s details a guard who placed his own brother in the whirligig for mocking a priest. He could not stand for 2 days, the record notes, nor did he know his own name. You understand that now. Because names are hard to remember when everything is spinning. They don't spin you continuously. That would end things too quickly. Instead, they stop just long enough to let the nausea rise. Then, just as your knees begin to steady, they start again. The cycle continues: stillness, spinning, retching, stillness, shame. It's a rhythm of disintegration. A quirky fact. In some regions, the whirligig was painted with bright patterns on the inside, swirls and lines designed to amplify vertigo. Some even placed mirrors inside to make the reflection spin with you. As if your own face wasn't dizzying enough. The children outside are laughing. You can hear them. Your head smacks the bars as you slip. Your legs are weak, your stomach twisted. You vomit again, and the contents of your gut swirl across the iron floor like a grotesque carousel. The onlookers wrinkle their noses, but they don't turn away. You're entertainment now. Eventually, the dizziness becomes something deeper: detachment. You're not just confused, you're unraveling. Time feels fragmented. You're not sure if this is the third spin or the 30th. Your limbs feel separate from your core. Your tongue is thick. Your heartbeat is distant. You forget why you're here. You forget where here even is. You are simply a shape trapped in another shape, spinning toward nothing. The whirligig doesn't scar the skin, but it etches the mind. Victims often emerged catatonic, wild-eyed, trembling, unable to speak. Some never recovered. Not because the spinning continued, but because it never stopped, at least not inside them. You feel that now. Because even as the cage slows, even as the door swings open and the air hits your face again, you are not steady. You are still spinning, and some part of you always will be. Inside your cottage waits low-roofed and damp. You already know where it leaks. You know where to set the bucket so your child's sleep won't be broken by a cold drip to the forehead. You also know the sound of every creak, every draft, every twitch of the floor as it settles. Because in this place, silence is never peaceful, it's suspicious. You duck through the door, baby squirming in your arms. Her breath is soft, uneven. You feel it against your collarbone. The fire's nearly out. You crouch and blow on the embers, praying they catch. They do, barely coughing back into dull red glow. Enough to keep the frost at bay, but only just. Your older children stir in their sleep on straw beds, tangled in old rags in each other. Someone coughs. You tell yourself it's the smoke. The cradle is near the hearth, your patchwork attempt at warmth. It's not much. A wooden box padded with whatever rags weren't too wet to use. You set the baby down, but your hand lingers. You watch. You listen. You know too well what it means when a baby stops breathing in the night. It's happened before, not just to you, to almost everyone. In your village, there are more tiny graves than named children. That's not exaggeration. It's historical fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, over half of all children died before their 5th birthday. Not because their mothers didn't love them, but because the world wasn't built to let them live. You sit back against the wall, wrapping your arms around your knees. Your bones ache. Your feet are still damp. Your baby is still breathing, but you can't stop listening for that pause that might mean she's not. You hum to her, a little song your mother used to sing. You don't remember the words, just the rhythm. She stirs, then settles. There's no such thing as sleeping through the night, not for a mother like you. Every hour is a patrol. Is she too cold? Too quiet? Did she roll onto her face? Is that fever or just flushed cheeks? You don't sleep so much as doze in panic, and yet oddly you laugh sometimes. Not because life is funny, but because if you didn't, you might break. A neighbor joked last week, if babies were as stubborn as weeds, they'd all make it to 5. Everyone laughed, bitterly, softly, like they were spitting the pain out in pieces. Your village has a graveyard, of course. It edges the fields. You've walked there too many times. Sometimes you pretend you're just out for water or firewood, but you always stop by the graves. Some so small they could be mistaken for flower beds. Some so fresh the earth still shivers. The one for your firstborn is there. You buried her in a shroud made from your best shift. It took weeks to scrub the smoke smell out of it before you gave it up. You still remember how light she felt wrapped in your arms for the last time. Like a bundle of air. Like a goodbye that came too soon. You don't cry anymore, not for that one. Not out loud. But sometimes at night when all the children are quiet and the wind rattles the shutters, your body remembers before your heart does. You clutch the child in your arms and wonder if tomorrow she'll still be here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back the fire now, glowing a bit stronger. Your baby sighs in her sleep. You touch her cheek with the back of your hand. Warm, not hot. Breathing, not gasping. It's a tiny victory. A breath held and released. Historians still argue whether medieval mothers loved less because they lost more. Some say they hardened, didn't name their children, didn't bond the same way. Others say that every child lost was a scar burned into their soul that they loved more fiercely because they had less time to do it. You don't know which side is right. You just know that your heart still aches, that grief leaves behind a silence that no lullaby can fill. But tonight you get one more night, one more chance to watch her sleep, one more chance to feel the rhythm of her chest rise and fall beneath your hand, and that in this world is everything. The wind wakes you before the baby does. It whistles through the cracks in your cottage wall, sharp as a blade threading itself around your ankles, up your sleeves beneath the threadbare cloak you fell asleep in. You don't want to move, your body aches like it was beaten in the night, but you sit up anyway. The fire has slumped to a soft, sulking glow. The baby is still sleeping, curled like a tiny comma in her cradle. You check her breathing before anything else. Still shallow, still warm. You let out a breath. The roof is leaking again. You don't have to look to know it. You can hear the soft, deliberate drip-drip of water hitting the same patched spot on the dirt floor. The thatch overhead is old. You know the leak by sound alone. You rise and place the bucket beneath it with practiced hands. Same bucket, same corner, same grim routine. The cottage is just one room, just big enough for the cradle, a fire pit, your straw pallet, the bench, and the few worn tools you didn't have to pawn last winter. There's no privacy here, no space to grieve, no such thing as your things. Everything is shared or lost. The walls are packed mud and the smell of damp wood smoke lives in them like a second skin. You move through the room on numb feet, checking your children one by one. One is twisted in a blanket face, shiny with sweat. One is coughing again, sharp, wet, too deep for comfort. You touch their foreheads. Not burning, not icy. You tell yourself that's good, but you don't trust it, not anymore. You crouch by the hearth, coaxing the fire back to life with a twig bundle in your breath. You blow gently, coaxing the embers. There's not much firewood left, and it's damp. You pray a little more out of muscle memory than conviction, and the flame catches. A small miracle right there on the floor. The smoke curls upward, hugging the rafters. It never leaves. It soaks into your hair, your clothes, your lungs. You don't notice it anymore until someone else mentions it. Then it comes back all at once, the stale, smoky sting of survival. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval peasant homes, fires were often kept burning around the clock. Extinguishing it meant laboriously relighting it from embers or coals, and there were no matches. Families used fire banking, covering the coals with ash at night to preserve them. Your fire bank is still glowing, and you thank whatever old trick your grandmother taught you for that. You stretch your back, groaning like an old beam, and glance toward the door. Morning hasn't broken yet, but your workday has already begun. Breakfast is a guessing game. You check the cupboard, really just a shelf and a cloth, and see a crust of bread, some dried peas, a smear of lard. No milk. The cow didn't give last night, or maybe someone else got to the bucket first. Again. You boil water for a thin gruel, crumbling the bread into it. It's not much, but it's warm. You don't eat yet. The children do first. That's how it is. Always. The baby wakes with a thin whimper. You cross the room and lift her into your arms. Her cheeks are cool, not too pale. Her nose is crusted. You wipe it gently with the edge of your sleeve. You whisper something nonsense and soothing words that don't mean anything but are shaped like love. She latches, but not for long. You're still producing milk, but barely. You're too thin. Your body can only give so much when you're running on turnips and prayers. You supplement with weak gruel, spooning it carefully between her lips, hoping she swallows. She does, for now. You think of your neighbor's baby, Anna's youngest, who coughed herself to death last week. The whole village knew she wasn't going to make it, but no one said it aloud. Not until the church bell tolled. Then everyone nodded as if they'd been expecting it all along. That's how it works here. Death rarely surprises you, only its timing does. Quirky tidbits: some mothers in your village swear by ash floors, scattering cold ash across the ground to soak up dampness and drive away pests. You've tried it. The floor feels cleaner, but your feet always come away gray. You catch your reflection in the soot-stained tin plate hanging by the hearth. You look older than you feel. Hair pulled back, face ruddy and lined. You haven't smiled in a few days, not really. Smirks don't count. Survival doesn't leave much room for joy, but you've learned to find humor where you can. Like the way your son insists rats can't bite people because they're scared of our breath. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly understood the links between dampness, smoke, and disease. Some believe they noticed patterns: more deaths in winter, more coughs in moldy homes, but lacked the framework to explain why. Others think it was all just instinct and repetition passed down, like folk songs: don't sleep near the wall, don't let the fire go out, don't drink the green water. You know better than to ask why things happen. The baby coughs once, then settles again. You rock her. You hum the same old tune. You think of the phrase you heard once: she died of breathing wrong. It was said as a joke, but no one laughed. You wish the world were cleaner, warmer, simpler. You wish you had enough to eat. You wish the roof would stop leaking and the fire would stay lit. You wish your children could sleep without coughing. You wish you could just once wake to a full belly and no fear. But you don't have time for wishing. The baby's eyes flutter open wide and curious. She smiles just barely, and it hits you like a blow. You smile back. You laugh softly, like someone remembering how. It's still raining outside. The wind howls like a story you'd rather not hear. But in here, in this room with its ash-covered floor and its patchy warmth, your child just smiled at you. and that will carry you through the morning. Feeding her is a gamble, a prayer wrapped in porridge and hope. You're sitting on the cold floor now, legs tucked beneath you, a wooden spoon in one hand, and your baby nestled awkwardly in the crook of your arm. Her eyes are half-lidded, her lips slick with the remnants of a thin oat gruel you made from the last of the dried grains and water boiled over yesterday's coals. She sputters a bit, nothing alarming, but you freeze anyway. The spoon hovers. You watch her closely. Swallow, please swallow. She does eventually, then frowns, then licks her lips like she's offended by the flavor. You almost smile. You wish that were the only concern, but it's never that simple because every mouthful could help her grow or make her sick. See, milk real safe. Milk is rare. If you're lucky, your body still gives just enough. But the hunger gnaws at you constantly, and your own supply has been weaker since winter. Some days she nurses and fusses and cries and flails, and she's hungry, but your body just doesn't have anything left to give. So you try what others have tried. Little goat's milk if you can get it, or cow's milk thinner and often sour by morning. You boil it if there's wood, but wood is rationed like treasure and fire is fickle. If the wood is wet or the wind too harsh, the flame chokes out. Then there's the water. The bucket near the hearth is what you're working with now. You fetched it yesterday morning from the well by the chapel. The water looked clean enough. You let it sit so the silt could settle, skimmed off the top. With care, whispered a quick prayer over it, more habit than hope, and used it to mix the gruel. But in the back of your mind, there's always the question, what if? Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval villages, the primary source of water wells, rivers, or ponds was often contaminated. Waterborne diseases like dysentery and cholera were leading causes of child mortality, especially for infants fed with unboiled water. You know this even if you don't have words for bacteria or infection. You've seen what happens. The fever, the curled belly, the moaning, the slow rattling breaths, and then the stillness. You've watched too many babies die in the arms of mothers who swore they did everything right. And they did. But here, right isn't always enough. You rock your daughter, gently spooning another bit of gruel into her mouth. She takes it this time, doesn't spit it out. Her little hand grips your sleeve, sticky and soft. It's a good sign, but your own stomach growls. Loudly. You haven't eaten yet. Not really, just a crust earlier. Maybe some wild greens if you find them later. You'll manage. You always do. Sometimes the baby refuses food entirely. That's when the fear starts to claw. You remember what happened to your cousin's child. He stopped eating one day, no reason. No illness, just stopped. The women whispered about curses. One said he was elf-shot, a fairy had stolen his appetite. You know better? Maybe. But you still find yourself muttering a charm under your breath just in case. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, mothers believed that if a baby suddenly lost the will to eat or cried without reason, it might be a changeling swapped by fairies in the night. Remedies included hanging iron scissors above the cradle or placing salt on the baby's tongue to force the real child back. You've never tried the salt, but you did hang an old knife above the cradle once. Just a small one. Dull. Still there, wrapped in red cloth. Your husband scoffed when he noticed, but you left it up. He hasn't lost a child like you have. He doesn't check for breathing every hour. And when the gruel goes down smoothly like today, it feels like magic. Like you somehow outwitted fate. Historians still argue whether these old customs, the scissors, the salt, the changeling stories serve to explain grief or to shield mothers from guilt. Was it easier to believe in a stolen child than a preventable death? Were these tales a coping mechanism or a genuine belief in a darker world than ours? Maybe both. You stir the pot again, the gruel's thickening as it cools. Too thick, maybe. You add another splash of water and hope it isn't too much. The baby starts to fuss again. You bounce her gently humming nonsense. The others begin to stir. Your older son shuffles across the floor, rubbing his eyes' hair like a nest. You hand him a bit of bread, and he devours it without a word. His sister grumbles about the cold, then sneezes. You check her forehead too. Always checking, always watching. Then you glance back at the baby. She's fallen asleep again. Her lips still damp with food, cheeks pink with heat from the fire. Breathing steady, mouth twitching like she's dreaming. And suddenly, despite everything, the damp, the hunger, the risk, you feel full. Not in your belly, in your chest, in your throat. You're too tired to cry, but something rises in you that feels a lot like peace. Maybe today she'll keep that food down. Maybe she'll grow stronger. Maybe she'll laugh at you again before sundown. You'll cook again tonight, whatever you can scrape together. Maybe carrot tops and wild greens from the ditch. Maybe broth from old bones if you're lucky. You don't think about what comes next. You can't afford to. Right now she's breathing. Right now she ate. Right now you won. That's enough. The moment she begins to crawl, the world turns hostile in a whole new way. Your baby, your miracle of breath and bones has decided she no longer wants to lie still. And in a cottage where the walls are crumbling, the hearth is always lit. The floor is riddled with sharp straw and spilled ash, and nothing was ever designed with safety in mind. Crawling means risk. It starts with small things. You set her down on a blanket to knead dough, and when you glance back, she's under the bench, tugging at the firewood pile like it's a stack of toys. Her fingers close around a splintered stick, and your heart does that thing again, the drop, the jolt, the quiet panic you've come to recognize as part of motherhood. You scoop her up quickly, press her to your chest. She cries more from protest than pain. She's fine, but it's only a matter of time. There are no baby gates in your world. No soft corners, no covered wells, no warning labels. There's the hearth, wide open stones, hot enough to blister fire, licking out like a living thing. There's the slop bucket half full of gray water and soap scraps. There's the broken floor tile where you once tripped carrying your son. There's the butcher's knife kept on the bench because there's nowhere else to put it. You see it all with new eyes now, not as the backdrop of survival, but as a minefield through which your child is determined to crawl. You do what you can. You tie the knife in cloth, you wedge the slop bucket into the corner, you move the cradle to block the hearth, you even shove a broom across the doorway, not to keep people out, but because your grandmother said a broom keeps wandering spirits away. It also slows down a crawling baby just enough. Still, she's quick and curious, and not yet wise enough to fear the fire or the corners or the gap in the floorboards that lets the wind whistle up from beneath. You assign your eldest daughter to watch her while you fetch water. She's barely old enough to keep herself clean, let alone protect her sister. But this is how it works. Children watch children. You don't have the luxury of uninterrupted supervision. You return with the water and find the baby halfway up the firewood pile giggling as she gums a stick blackened with soot. Your daughter shrugs. She likes it. You don't yell, "What would be the point?" You just pick the baby up again, brush the ash from her cheeks, kiss the top of her head, and say, "She doesn't get to like that." Mainstream. Historical fact. Medieval cottages were dangerous places for children. Fires were always burning, floors were hard and uneven, and even household animals, pigs, goats, chickens often roamed indoors. Childhood accidents were a major cause of death. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The toddler who fell into the hearth and didn't live. The baby who tipped a pot of stew over herself. The child who chased the chickens too close to the well. You know these stories aren't exaggerations. You know some of them by name. Your own mother used to tell you that toddlers were like candle flames, beautiful, warm, and one breath away from going out. It sounds harsh, but it's true. And yet you can't bubble wrap your child. You can't follow her every moment. You can't stop preparing food or hauling water or sweeping ash from the corners. The world doesn't pause for safety checks. You do your best. That's all any of you can do. When she sleeps, you go over the cottage like a soldier on patrol. You move the knives farther back. You wedge a log against the cradle so it won't rock too far. You poke the fire down until it's just glowing coals. You mutter charms under your breath. You even sprinkle salt at the doorstep, not because you truly believe it wards off evil, but because your hands need to do something. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that putting a pair of iron scissors under a baby's mattress would protect her from harm spirit sickness, or even sudden infant death. You don't have scissors, but you've tied a bit of iron to her blanket hem just in case. Historians still argue whether these practices were rooted in ancient pagan rituals or simply evolved from generations of maternal desperation. Was it religion? Superstition? or just the thousand-year-old echo of mothers doing whatever it took to feel some sense of control. Maybe it doesn't matter. You'd dance backwards with a bone in your teeth if someone told you it would keep your baby safe. Because deep down you know the truth, your home is not safe. Not because you're careless, not because you don't try, but because the world is full of dangers that don't wait for your attention. Even the cradle has teeth. Your neighbor lost her child last spring, laid him down to sleep and woke to silence. They say he rolled into the wall and suffocated. Or maybe he had a fever no one noticed. Or maybe it was just his time. The priest said God took him early, the midwife said nothing. You remember the funeral clearly. The cloth-wrapped bundle. The quietness of the crowd. The way his mother didn't cry, at least not where anyone could see. She just went home, swept her floor, and boiled water like it was any other day. You envied her calm and hated it. You don't want to get that good at grieving. Your baby is sleeping now, curled on a folded wool blanket, one hand curled under her cheek. You kiss her forehead and whisper a promise you've made 100 times. I'll keep you safe. I'll try. Tomorrow she'll crawl again. She'll reach for the fire. She'll put something terrible in her mouth. She'll find a new danger to explore with wild joy. And you'll follow. You always do. You love her, of course, fiercely, desperately, without condition. But you still haven't named her. You've whispered to her, called her pet names, murmured nonsense syllables into her damp hair while rocking her to sleep. But not a name. Not the kind that sticks. Not the kind they carve into church records or etch onto the smooth face of a wooden cross. Because in your village, a name isn't just a name. It's a gamble. It's a kind of invitation one the world too often declines. So many babies don't make it past their first month, their first fever, their first night in a damp cradle. Why call her something when that something might just become another ghost? Mainstream historical fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, parents waited weeks, sometimes months, before officially naming their children. Infant mortality was so common that giving a name too early was considered either unlucky or unnecessary. The midwife said to wait until the baptism. Said naming her too soon was a surefire way to bring on a tragedy. You don't argue. Not out loud. But sometimes when it's just the two of you and the fire is low and she's warm and soft and breathing easy, you almost say it. The name you picked. The one you chose the moment she first grabbed your finger with her impossibly small hand. The name you don't let yourself speak aloud because you don't want the world to hear it yet. Not until it's safe. If it's ever safe. The older women understand. You've seen it in their eyes when you hesitate. You've seen the way they pause before asking, "What's her name?" Then nod slowly when you don't answer. They've been here too. They know. Your husband doesn't ask. Maybe because he knows, maybe because he doesn't want to. He calls her the little one or your girl, or sometimes just kisses the top of her head and says nothing at all. It's not that you're detached, quite the opposite. You're so attached it hurts to breathe. That's the contradiction nobody explains to you when you become a mother in a world like this. How to love fully knowing you might lose her. How to give your whole soul to a child who might vanish in a night. It feels impossible. But somehow, you do it anyway. You tell yourself the name doesn't matter. That it won't change anything. That whether you whisper it or not, fate will do what it always does. But then you catch yourself humming it under your breath. Just the first syllable, like your heart is practicing before your mouth catches up. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that if you named a baby too soon and they died, their soul would become restless, unable to pass into heaven without a proper identity. Some mothers even gave placeholder names like Pip or Littlekin to trick fate. You've heard the whispers about the boy across the lane who died before he was christened. Some say his spirit still knocks on his mother's shutters during storms. Others say she sees him in her dreams, calling for her by the name she never gave him. You don't believe in ghosts? Not really. But you've caught yourself staring at the corner of the room some nights, heart-thudding. Certain something is there. Historians still argue whether this reluctance to name infants was rooted in genuine superstition, practical survival strategy, or emotional protection. Maybe it's all of them. Maybe it's just what happens when loss becomes part of daily life. You know you'll name her soon. The priest is coming next week. There's talk of a small baptism for the winter babies. If she lives that long, and oh, you hate how often your thoughts include that phrase, you'll hold her at the altar in your best linen and speak the name aloud for the first time. You imagine that moment so clearly it feels like memory. the warm weight of her in your arms, the flicker of candlelight, the smell of damp stone and beeswax, the priest's voice, the name on your lips. You want it, but you also fear it, because names mean futures, and in this place, futures are fragile things. Still, you practice. In the silence. In the dark. You mouth it when no one's watching. You picture her toddling across the cottage floor, you calling it out. Laughing when she turns. Scolding when she doesn't. Whispering it when you tuck her in. And sometimes in the deepest part of night, when she's breathing slow and steady and you're still awake watching her chest rise and fall, you dare to say it aloud. Just once. Barely a whisper. And then you wait, as if the universe is listening. As if it might strike you down for the hubris of hope. But nothing happens. No cough, no cold breeze, no sign of disapproval from the beyond. Just your baby warm and sleeping. So you say it again, this time with a little more breath, a little more courage. You place your hand over her chest and feel her heartbeat slow and sure. And you think, maybe it's time. Maybe she gets to keep this name. Maybe you get to tell the village women next week, proud and grinning like it's a secret too precious to keep. Maybe the worst has passed. Maybe it's not that you believe in magic. Not really. You don't trust witches, you've never seen a fairy. And the village priest is quick to remind everyone that charms and tokens are sinful distractions. But when the nights stretch long and the wind moans around your door like something looking for a way in, well, belief becomes less about religion and more about survival. So you hang dried herbs above the cradle. Rue if you can find it. Sage if you're lucky. Lavender if someone has it to spare. Sometimes it's just weeds with the right shape. You knot them tight and whisper over them. Not spells exactly, but promises, half prayers, habits learned at your mother's knee. You also tuck red thread into your child's tunic hem. The old women say red keeps harm away. And the broom still lies across the doorway not to sweep with, but to confuse the spirits. They forget how to step over it, your grandmother said once, entirely serious. Spirits hate manners. Quirky tidbit. In many parts of medieval Europe, mothers kept iron keys, knives, or scissors near newborns, not for use, but because iron was believed to repel evil spirits and fairies. Sometimes a knife was placed under the child's pillow. Yes, really. You draw the line at that. Your baby already wriggles enough in her sleep without resting on cold steel. Put the small iron pin in her swaddling that stays. You'd do worse if it meant she'd live. The house smells like ash and bitter roots. You've brewed another tea from foraged herbs, chamomile, yarrow, a little mint. Nothing too strong. Just enough to ease a cough, maybe settle her stomach. You wave the steam toward her nose, hoping the warmth helps. She sneezes, then giggles. A small victory. It's amazing how joy sneaks in here, isn't it? Amid moldy straw and superstition and shivering nights, it appears in a sneeze, a hiccup, a laugh. But you don't let down your guard. Not really. The charms don't always work. You remember when the fever took your neighbor's son. His mother had done everything right. The herbs, the prayers, the priest, the healer. She even poured holy water under the threshold just in case the sickness was creeping up from the floorboards. He still died. Your neighbor never took the herbs down? They're still hanging there now, brown and withered, swaying in the draft like brittle ghosts. Mainstream historical fact. The line between medicine and magic in the medieval period was often indistinct. Mothers relied on a combination of herbal remedies, religious rituals, and folk customs passed down, orally each believed to offer protection, though few were scientifically effective. You boil more water. The fire cooperates this morning. That's something. You pour the tea into a wooden cup and set it on the hearthstone to cool. You sip it first, just to be sure. You've heard horror stories of mothers accidentally poisoning their own children with the wrong leaf, the wrong root. No bitterness, no burning tongue. Good enough. She drinks a few sips without fussing. Her little hands reach for the cup, though she fumbles it. You help, carefully. She's watching you now, wide-eyed like she knows you're trying to save her. Or maybe she's just interested in the steam. Either way, you pretend it's gratitude. You glance at the herbs again, drying in bundles above the fire. The healer said they'd lose potency if not used by next moon. You don't know if that's true, but it sounds right. It sounds like something people believe. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more symbolic than medicinal. Did they offer real healing or simply comfort? Were the charms a form of ancient knowledge lost to time or just desperate gestures against an unforgiving world? You suspect it's both, because even if the tea doesn't work, even if the red thread does nothing, even if the broom only sweeps shadows and not spirits, you need to feel like you're doing something. The alternative is unbearable. There's a string of dried garlic hanging near the window. Your husband scoffs at it, but you leave it up. The smell reminds you of your mother's kitchen, of days when you were the baby in the cradle protected by someone else's rituals. You wonder sometimes what your mother feared. If she lit candles, if she scattered salt, if she muttered her own blend of Latin and local curses when you got sick. You wish you could ask her, but she's buried at the edge of the village under a crooked cross that's missing its top beam. Her name's nearly faded from the wood now. You say her name anyway, when you're scared, when the baby is burning hot and won't stop crying. You whisper help me and hope she hears. You're not alone in this. You never are. Every mother you know does the same strange little things. One places a silver coin in the baby's shoe. Another draws a cross in ash on the child's forehead every morning. One woman swears by sleeping with her child's swaddle under her own pillow for luck. You don't laugh at any of them. You just listen, and you copy the ones that feel right. Because in a world where death doesn't knock, it just walks right in. You'll try anything. Today, at least, your baby's chest is warm. Her belly is full. The cough hasn't worsened. You hang a fresh bundle of rue by the cradle and pat the salt circle around the hearth, back into shape with your foot. Then you sit down beside her and exhale like you've been holding your breath all winter. She's okay. You're not sure for how long. But for now, the spirits are confused, the fire is burning, and the charms are holding. That will have to be enough. Some nights you don't sleep. Not because the baby is crying, though she does often, but because she isn't. Because the room goes too still, too quiet, and silence in your world isn't peace. It's a warning. You lie there in the dark, heart thudding, listening so hard your ears ache. You hear the wind, the fire crackle, the slow creak of the rafters as they shift and settle. But not her. So you get up, you cross the floor barefoot, careful not to kick the cradle. You lean down, you don't touch her, not right away. You've learned not to jostle too quickly. You just hover, hold your breath, and wait. Then finally you see it, her chest rising. Barely, but enough. You release the breath you didn't know you were holding, and maybe you cry. Just a little. This is what fear looks like now. It doesn't come as wolves or sword-bearing soldiers. It comes in silence, in stillness, in the possibility that your baby might not wake up. She stirs then a soft grunt, shifting against the rags you've patted her with. Her hand curls into a tiny fist. You press your lips to her forehead and whisper nonsense. You don't dare go back to sleep, because the last time you did that, well, you remember. Mainstream historical fact. Sudden infant death syndrome, though not named until much later, claimed countless medieval babies. Often mothers woke to find their child lifeless in the cradle beside them, cause unknown. Explanations ranged from bad humors to smothering to more often fate. You lost one that way. Your first, a boy. Perfect little hands, a soft, soft mouth, a cry like a bird's. One night he fussed for hours. The next morning he was cold. There was no blood, no bruises, just stillness. You wrapped him in linen and held him for too long. You remember the silence more than the moment. Everyone came. The women brought bread. The priest muttered prayers. The midwife said nothing at all. Just gave you that look. The one that says you'll survive this even when you don't believe her. You buried him before noon. The ground was hard. It always is when you're not ready. The next day your arms still ached like he was in them. You remember the weight of emptiness more than anything else. People said all the things people say. He's with the angels now. God needed another soul. At least he didn't suffer. None of it helped. None of it helps. Grief in a medieval village has no privacy. There are no counselors, no time off. The bread still needs kneading. The fire still needs tending. The others still need feeding. So you got up the next day, and the next, and the next, because no one else was going to do it. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, grieving mothers weren't allowed to attend Mass immediately after losing a child. It was believed their sorrow might taint the sacred space or invite misfortune onto others. Instead, they were expected to grieve quietly and resume chores within a day or two. Historians still argue whether these practices were based in theology or community control. Was it protection, punishment, A way to push women past their own heartbreak before it could slow the village down? You don't know. You only know that the tears come at night now, in silence. You never speak of him, not because you've forgotten, but because remembering is like pulling open a wound that never really closed. You told yourself when the new baby came that you wouldn't get too close, that you'd be practical, guarded, logical. You told yourself it wouldn't happen again. But then she wrapped her tiny fingers around yours, and you broke every rule. And now every cough is a threat, every fever a storm on the horizon, every silence a scream. Tonight she's safe, but that doesn't stop your mind from wandering. What if you hadn't checked? What if you'd fallen asleep? What if you stop? You've learned to pull your thoughts back like reins on a panicked horse. Instead, you focus on what's real. The warmth of her skin, the rise and fall of her chest, the soft hum of your lullaby as you sway by the fire. She's alive. You whisper her name, yes, her name, now that you've finally dared to use it. You speak it like a charm, like armor, like a promise. And maybe he hears it too. You're first. Maybe he's somewhere curled in whatever cradle heaven provides hearing you love again. Maybe he's not jealous, just watching, just proud. You sit back down near the hearth baby in your arms. She sleeps. You stay awake. Not because you must, but because you can. Because tonight you still have her. And that's worth staying up for. The morning light creeps in slowly, hesitant and gray. It filters through the gaps in the shutters like a secret brushing the dirt floor, the bent wooden beams and the huddled shapes of your other children still asleep on beds of rags and straw. You haven't slept. Not really. You never do, not fully. You've learned to live in a half state, half aware, half alert, always listening for that soft change in breathing. The sudden cough, the silence that means everything. But today something remarkable happens. Your baby laughs. It's sudden like a hiccup. Then again, clearer this time. A gurgling squeal of joy that fills the small room like birdsong. You freeze in place, spoon midair fire crackling softly at your feet. She's lying on her back on the wool blanket, kicking her feet, eyes following the sunlight that dances on the ceiling. You want to cry, you don't. But your throat aches the way it does when you've swallowed something too big for your chest. You kneel down beside her and make a face. Eyes wide, tongue out, and she laughs again. Louder this time. It echoes. And you think this moment might be enough to carry me through the next famine. Mainstream historical fact. For medieval mothers, small joys like a baby's first laugh or first steps were cherished deeply, not just as milestones, but as signs. Signs that the child might live. That they were gaining strength. That they were real, not just passing shadows. Your older children stir. Your son groans and rubs his face with dirty hands. Your daughter crawls toward the baby and pokes her cheek gently like she can't believe the laughter either. You hear your own voice tell her to be careful. You always say that now. But part of you knows this moment right now, this is life. This is what you hold on to. Not dates, not festivals, not even seasons. Just little bursts of joy that flare up between waves of grief. The baby laughs again when your daughter tickles her toes, and for the first time in a long time, you laugh too. Not a tired breath of disbelief, but a real sound, full and bright and startling. You realize then how long it's been since you've heard that sound from your own mouth. Your stomach growls, pulling you back to the practical. You pass around the morning crust hard bread soaked in warm water to soften it, and thank whatever saints are listening that there's enough for everyone to have a bite. You give the biggest piece to your son today. He helped chop kindling yesterday with hands that are still blistered. Your daughter doesn't complain. She's watching the baby who's now contentedly sucking her fingers, cheeks full and pink. You savor it. You've learned to store these memories like kindling. You stack them up in the corners of your heart, ready to burn when the long nights come again. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, mothers believed that babies who smiled early were blessed and might even be reincarnations of beloved ancestors. A laughing child was seen as a good omen, a sign that the household was protected. You don't know what you believe. You just know that for once you feel lucky. You set to work. There's always work. Bread to bake buckets, to fill laundry, to scrub in the icy stream that cuts through the lower fields. You strap the baby to your chest and hum while you knead dough made mostly of barley and prayer. Your daughter hums with you. Sometimes you make up little songs, silly things, nonsense rhymes. You don't remember all the words from your own childhood, so you invent new ones. words that rhyme with mud, cold, and hungry, songs that make your children giggle even when they're shivering. That's how you know they're still children. If they can laugh, they haven't given up yet. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant life offered any real happiness. Some say the grind of survival left no space for joy. Others insist that these people, your people, found peace in simplicity, pride in daily victories, and moments of wonder in the smallest things. You believe the second group. Because what else do you call it when your daughter pulls a dandelion from the path and tucks it behind her sister's ear, declaring her the flower queen, and the baby squeals with glee? What else do you call it when your son finds a beetle and builds it a little home from twigs, then insists it be invited to dinner? It's not grandeur, it's not splendor, it's not recorded in books or sermons, but it's joy, and it's real. You hang the laundry in the patch of weak morning sun, pinning damp linen between crooked fence posts. Your fingers are already red and cracked from the cold, but the warmth on your face, even faint, is a balm. The baby watches the cloth flutter and reaches for the sky. You whisper, "Not yet, little one, not yet," because she doesn't know how fragile this all is, doesn't know how quickly joy can turn, how a cold can slip into fever, how a stumble can turn to stillness, how a mother's laughter can become a widow's silence. You do, you know, but not today. Today she laughed, and that is enough. Tonight you'll tuck her in a little tighter, whisper one more blessing, touch the red thread at the edge of her tunic, and think of every mother before you doing the same thing, hoping, holding on, and stealing joy wherever they can find it. The village well is crowded this morning, mothers mostly. Buckets in hand, babies tied to backs or clinging to skirts, toddlers squatting in the dust poking at pebbles. You join the line, your baby snug against your chest, warm and sleepy, and thankfully not coughing yet. You nod at the woman ahead of you, Marta, whose son just got over a chest cold, and exchange the same phrase everyone says here when they see a healthy child. "Still breathing," then White. "Still breathing," you answer. It's not a joke. But somehow it makes people smile. This is where the mothers gather, not the church, not the feast hall, not even the market. Here at the well, you share what matters. Not news rumors are stale by morning, but the details of survival. Did you try honey and water for the cough? Did you hear the healer say onion poultice for swelling? Did your baby cry all night too? There's no pretense here, no performance. You're too tired for that, and so is everyone else. You share stories, remedies, sometimes even milk. You hold each other's children while someone strains to lift a full bucket. You pass down the latest, maybe true magic, like it's gospel. Quirky tidbit. Some mothers swear by whispering their child's name backward into a clay pot, then burying the pot under the hearth. It's supposed to hide the child from death's notice for one more day. You haven't tried that. Not yet. The line moves slowly. You sway slightly to keep your baby asleep, shifting her weight from one hip to the other. Your back screams. Your arms burn. But you smile at Anna behind you and ask how her eldest is doing. She shrugs. "Still hungry," she says, "but not dead." You both laugh. A little too loud. A little too bitter. That's how it is here. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval communities, wells were more than sources of water. They were hubs of gossip, medicine, and mutual support. It was often the only time mothers could speak freely, exchange knowledge, and form social bonds. You remember the first time you came to the well after your first child died. No one asked questions. No one said his name. But Marta put a hand on your arm as she passed you the rope, and Margareta slipped a small sprig of rue into your pocket. No words, just knowing. You still have that sprig. Dried brittle hidden in your linen chest like a pressed wound. The line moves again. You're closer now. The clatter of the bucket hitting stone echoes up the shaft. Someone pulls too hard, and water sloshes over the edge. Children squeal. A mother curses, then laughs. You watch one of the babies toddle too close to the well. 3 women leap at once. He's pulled back before his second foot crosses the stones. His mother clutches him to her chest like a prize won in a cruel game. Then, because that's how you all survive, she mutters, "He'll be the death of me," and everyone laughs again. You draw your water. Carefully. The rope is frayed. You wrap it around your hand like you were taught, tight enough to hold, not tight enough to burn. The bucket rises heavy, the wood damp and splintered. You lift it, muscles shaking, and pour half into your smaller jug. It smells clean today. No dead frog, no sour bloom. You offer a silent thanks and step aside for the next in line. As you walk home, the water sloshing, baby stirring, You feel the ache in your shoulders shift into something else. Not quite hope, not yet, but something like companionship. Like the heaviness isn't just yours anymore. Historians still argue whether medieval village women formed true communal bonds or were quietly locked in competition over resources health, even whose child lived longest. But you've seen both. Sometimes there's envy, yes. When someone's baby is plump while yours is sick. When their roof holds through the storm and yours collapses again. But more often there's comfort, a knowing glance, a shared burden. You need them, and they need you, because husbands don't ask how much water a baby needs. Priests don't notice if your child hasn't laughed in days. But the women at the well, they see it all. They remember. Anna leans in when you pass her house on the way home. Your little one's getting fat cheeks, she says, half a compliment, half a warning. Don't make death jealous. You nod. You don't respond. You've heard that one before. When you get home, your daughter is sweeping the floor half-heartedly. Your son's playing with sticks again, arranging them into little fences for invisible animals. The baby's eyes flutter open. She fusses, hungry again. You sit by the fire and feed her, breath rising with the steam from the jug you set nearby. She drinks greedily, still breathing, still drinking, still yours. Outside, the village clatters and moves. Chickens scatter. Someone shouts, a dog barks. A new day already fraying at the edges. You rock your baby slowly and think of the women at the well, of the things they've lost, of the things they still carry, of the things you all refuse to let go of. You whisper the old blessing under your breath as she eats, the one your mother used, the one her mother whispered at the same fire holding the same hope. Grow strong, little one, but not too fast. Let the days be kind, she coos in reply. And you think just for a moment that maybe they will be. There's never enough. Not enough food. Not enough wood. Not enough cloth sleep time prayers, hands, or light. The list goes on like a church litany you never quite finish. You've gotten good at stretching things. Stretching porridge with water cloth, with patches meat, with root vegetables. Stretching your patience, your strength, your hope. You could be a seamstress for God himself with how much you've learned to mend and mend again. The bread is smaller today. You noticed it while slicing how thin you had to go to make enough for all the mouths. Your son asked for more, and you smiled and said he could have it after chores, but you already know there's none left. Maybe you'll offer him a boiled turnip instead. He'll wrinkle his nose, but he'll eat it. The baby is chewing on a crust now, gums working it like it's the finest thing she's ever tasted. Her little hands are dirty from crawling because dirt is everywhere, but she's happy. That alone feels like luxury. Your husband brought home a rabbit 2 nights ago. A gift from the steward in exchange for some work splitting logs. You turned it into a stew so thin it almost didn't count as food. Everyone got a few bites. You saved the bones to boil again tomorrow. Mainstream historical fact. For medieval peasants, food insecurity was constant. Even in a good season, families often faced the hungry gap, a stretch between late winter and early spring, where stores ran out and new crops hadn't grown. Children were particularly vulnerable during these months. You know the hungry times. You've lived them. You've watched neighbors eat boiled nettles and stale oats soaked in water. You've bartered what little you had for a handful of withered apples or a handful of barley. You once traded a wool shawl for a half-wheel of sour cheese. That shawl had belonged to your mother. You still think about it when your shoulders ache from the cold. The cottage doesn't hold warmth. You try stuffing rags and cracks, banking the fire, hanging old linens over the door, but the wind finds you anyway. It crawls across the floor, up your spine, and into your bones. You wrap the baby tight, layering her in every scrap you can spare. Her feet are covered in your old stockings, knotted at the ends. Her hat is a sleeve from a dress too threadbare to wear. You made it while she slept by candlelight, pricking your fingers so often the cloth has little brown marks that only you recognize. She looks up at you with her wide eyes, her cheeks red with cold, but her body warm. You tuck her into your chest and rock just a little. You tell her stories, nonsense things about brave hens and talking rain and sheep that fly. You lie, sweetly, constantly, because there's not enough, but there's you. And so you give her that. Your daughter walks in from the yard, her apron muddy from gathering sticks. You thank her and let her sit by the fire. You don't ask if she's cold. You already know. She picks at her sleeves and tries not to shiver. You give her your cup. Just hot water and mint, but it feels warm in the hands. She smiles at you like she understands the trade your comfort for hers. She drinks slowly even though you know she wants to gulp. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, when food ran out completely, mothers would smear a little honey or grease on their children's lips, not for nourishment, but to trick the stomach into feeling soothed. It wasn't sustenance, it was ritual. You've done it. Once when you were down to nothing. A bit of animal fat smeared on the baby's gums. She calmed. You cried. Not because it worked, but because you hated how well it worked. Historians still argue whether the medieval poor were truly resilient or merely resigned. Did they find meaning in hardship, or did they simply adapt to survive because there was no other option? You don't care what the scholars think. You only know the look in your son's eyes when he asks if there'll be food tomorrow. You know the way your husband pretends he isn't hungry. The way your daughter chews slower when the bread is small. You know the sharp ache of not enough. And yet you go on. You patch another hole in your cloak. You rewrap the baby. You boil the bones again. You spin stories from thin air and comfort from steam. You stitch a blanket from 2 ruined tunics and call it new. You whisper thanks over scraps. You stretch and stretch and stretch again. And still the baby sleeps. Still the fire burns. Still the day passes. You think of the other mothers. You know they're doing the same, kneading dough with cold hands, wrapping children in bedsheets once used for wedding nights, whispering lullabies through cracked lips. You think about the woman down the lane who lost her roof last week and is now sleeping in the bakehouse with her 2 little ones under a single fur. You brought her a heel of bread. She wept like it was gold. There's never enough. But somehow between the ache and the worry, the waiting and the watching, you make something out of it. You make survival. You make motherhood. You make love layered in soot and threadbare cloth. And tonight when the children are finally fed, when the fire's banked, when the baby lies still in her cradle and your back is against the rough stone wall, you'll close your eyes and think, today we may do. And that's no small thing. She's walking now. Wobbling really arms out steps wide little feet, slapping the cold packed earth of your cottage floor like a clumsy duckling. But she's upright, she's moving, and she's grinning at her own bravery. You watch her from the hearth, your heart caught somewhere between pride and fear. Because this milestone, like all the others, is a double-edged blade. It means freedom for her and endless new dangers for you. She stumbles, catches herself, laughs. Your son cheers, your daughter claps. You smile too, but your eyes never leave her. Because now the cottage is a gauntlet of risks, and she sees none of them. Just places to explore. The fire pit is a glowing mouth in the middle of the floor. The water bucket is inviting and just low enough for her to reach. There's a bent nail poking from the doorframe, a sharpened stick near the kindling pile, and the old iron pot you tripped over yesterday still sits near the bench. You make a mental note to move it. Just like you've made mental notes to move a dozen other things you're too tired to move. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval homes, the lack of separation between living, cooking, and sleeping spaces created an environment full of everyday hazards, especially for young children. Burns, drownings, falls, and suffocation were tragically common causes of death. She waddles toward the slop bucket. You leap up faster than your knees like. Scoop her up mid-step. She squeals, delighted with the game, unaware how close she came to disaster. You hold her close and mutter, "Not today, little one, not today." She presses her face into your neck. The warmth of her cheek almost hurts with how alive it is. Every milestone here comes tangled in worry. Her first step could be her first stumble into fire. Her first word could follow her first fever. Her first taste of solid food might choke her or nourish her, no way to know. You remember the story of the miller's boy. 3 winters ago, he wandered out the door while his mother was kneading dough. No one noticed until the bread was in the oven. They found him face down in the stream behind the orchard. It was too shallow for a grown man to drown in. You held your baby tighter that night, watched her sleep. Didn't sleep yourself. You've grown paranoid. You know it. You wedge the cradle against the wall. You stack firewood so it blocks off the hearth. You tie a bit of string across the door so she can't wander out. You even started singing nonsense rhymes to keep track of her steps so if she's quiet, you know she's up to something. Your daughter thinks it's silly. You don't care. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, mothers used to sew tiny bells into the hems of toddlers' tunics, not for fashion, but as makeshift alarms. The sound of the bells meant the child was moving. Silence meant trouble. You wish you had bells. Instead, you rely on instinct. You can hear the wrong kind of silence now. You know the difference between a child playing and a child hiding. between curiosity and danger. You know the sound of a held breath of a room gone too still. She's quiet again. You turn and find her halfway up the bench. She's managed to climb onto a sack of grain, reaching for your ladle like it's treasure. You hurry, you grab her, and when she squeals in protest, you laugh, but your hands are shaking. Historians still argue whether medieval mothers were overprotective or resigned. Some suggest they distanced themselves emotionally as a defense. Others argue they watched their children like hawks clinging harder because the world was so eager to take them. You don't feel detached. You feel raw, exposed. Like the love you carry for this tiny human is a fire you can't put down and can't let burn too hot. You try to teach her what danger looks like. You show her the hearth and say hot over and over until she mimics the word back-lisping and delighted. You let her touch a warm stone, just warm enough to startle, not hurt. You show her the knife and say no a dozen times a day. She giggles when you're stern, thinks it's a game. You envy that. The way danger rolls off her like water off a duck's back. The way she sees the world as bright, open, full of possibilities. She doesn't yet know about illness, about empty bellies, about sudden silence. You hope she never does. But that's not how the world works here. Still, you give her a wooden spoon to play with. Still, you sing her a lullaby even when your voice is hoarse. Still, you follow her steps like a shadow. And when she trips, because she always does, you're there. Every time. So far. Tonight, after the children are asleep, you go around the room and tuck away every sharp edge, every dangling cloth, every tool, every open bucket. The house looks bare now, stripped, empty, but you sleep better for it. She's in the cradle again, arms thrown overhead, mouth open, dreams thick behind her fluttering eyelids. You brush a strand of hair from her brow and whisper, "You made it another day." Then you say it again, to yourself this time, "I made it another day." And that's the truth of motherhood in this world. You survive alongside them. You fall when they fall. You rise when they rise. And every tiny footstep is another victory over the thousand small ways this world tries to take them. There are no doctors here. No white coats. No glass jars of medicine. No soft beds with clean sheets. When a child gets sick in your village, healing is a matter of instinct luck and whatever dried herbs you've managed to keep hanging from the rafters. Your baby's skin is warm tonight, too warm. Not flushed from playing or from firelight, but from the inside. From fever. You press your hand to her forehead, then to your own to compare. It's hotter than it should be. She stirs in her cradle, whimpers, then coughs a deep, rasping cough that sounds like it was dragged up from somewhere dark. Your stomach drops. You don't panic. Panic is a luxury. Instead, you move. You throw another log on the fire, damp though it is. You scoop the baby up, wrap her tighter, whisper soothing nothings while your mind races through everything you know, everything you've ever been told. Water, wipe her down, keep her cool but not cold. You dampen a cloth, run it across her cheeks, her chest. She squirms but doesn't cry. She doesn't have the strength for it. You hate that. Mainstream historical fact. In the absence of formal medical care, medieval villagers, especially women, relied on a blend of herbal medicine, midwifery, and inherited knowledge. Remedies included teas made from chamomile willow bark for fevers and yarrow for inflammation. None guaranteed survival. You go to your pouch. It's not much a scrap of leather tied with string. Inside, dried leaves of something your grandmother once called feverweed, though no one seems to know its real name. You crush it with the back of a spoon, steep it in water, blow on it, pray over it. You taste it first, bitter but not acrid. Then offer it to your baby by the smallest spoon you own. She drinks, half a sip, then another. You wait, and wait. She dozes off against your shoulder, limp as dough. You keep her upright, rocking gently. You hum a tune that has no words anymore, just sound. It's the same one your mother used, the one her mother might have sung too. Outside, the wind has picked up. It whistles through the gaps in the shutters like a warning. You throw another blanket over your baby, but not too thick. You don't want the heat trapped in, just enough to fight the cold in the floorboards. The older children sleep soundly. For now, your son mumbles in his sleep. Your daughter has one foot sticking out from under the blankets. You cover her quietly, careful not to wake her. You think about the healer, the old woman who lives near the woods. She has a pouch full of roots and a tongue sharp enough to skin bark. She charges nothing but expects something a basket of eggs a back rubbed with salve, a promise kept. You've been to her before. For coughs, for cuts, for the time your daughter wouldn't stop vomiting for 3 days. The healer gave you a bundle of bitter herbs and told you to hang a white cloth over the fire and burn it at midnight. You did both. Your daughter lived. You never figured out which part helped. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval villages, it was believed that illness entered through the air as invisible darts, elf shot. To treat it, mothers would pass their child through a loop of twisted wood or burn wool at the hearth while reciting protective rhymes. Science had not yet arrived. Only rituals. Historians still argue whether these rites were forms of proto-medicine or merely emotional coping mechanisms. You don't care. You've seen enough half-recovered babies to know sometimes the ritual helps because it has to. You murmur the rhyme anyway, just in case. Your husband isn't home tonight, off helping mend a collapsed shed 2 farms over. He'll be back by morning, probably with cold feet and sore hands and no idea what you've battled through while he was away. The baby stirs, moans softly, then coughs again. You rock harder, press your lips to her temple. She's burning up. You whisper, stay. Just stay with me. Over and over, like the words might anchor her here. You remember when Marta's boy had the same cough, how it rattled him for 3 days before he stopped breathing altogether. The priest said it was God's will. The healer said it was too much damp in the lungs. Marta didn't say anything. She just wrapped the boy and dug the grave herself. You remember how strong she looked with a shovel in her hands. You don't want to be that strong. The baby's breathing slows. You don't sleep. You watch her chest rise and fall. You feed the fire with every scrap of wood left. You keep the cloth damp and cool. You hum, you whisper, you hope. It's all you have left. Eventually her brow cools just slightly, not much, but enough. Her fists unclench, her lips relax. You keep holding her, even when your arms ache, even when your neck knots, you don't dare move. Because if she sleeps through the night, if she wakes with bright eyes and an empty belly, if she laughs again like she did just yesterday, then maybe you'll believe you did something right. But until then, you watch, you wait. You stay awake because you love her, and because you're afraid that if you don't, no one else will. You make your way to church, barefoot baby wrapped tight against your chest. Your feet sink into mud softened by last night's rain, and the chill bites up through your soles, but you hardly notice anymore. Cold is a background hum in your life, persistent, but no longer surprising. The path to the chapel is uneven, scattered with stones and horse droppings, but you know every dip and twist by feel now. The church bell rings once. Not to call you Mass was hours ago, but to mark the turning of the day. You're not here for Mass. You're here because you have to be seen. It's not just about faith, it's about place. You stand near the back wall, not kneeling. Your knees are too swollen today, but head bowed the baby, dozing lightly under your chin. The incense makes her twitch. You sway side to side, slow rhythmic, like prayer but not. The priest's voice drones, reciting in Latin, though half the words blur into hollow music. You don't understand much anymore. You remember scraps from your girlhood Pater av Sancta Maria, but the rest slips past like smoke. What you understand is ritual, the flicker of candlelight, the mumble of forgiveness, the shared nods between mothers who, like you, slip in just long enough to say we're still here. Mainstream historical fact. Church was more than a spiritual hub. In the medieval village, it was a social checkpoint. Mothers were expected to return to church after childbirth for a churching ritual, a blessing of purification part, holy gratitude, part reintegration into village life. You remember your churching. 40 days after the baby was born. Your legs still shaky, your belly soft and sore. The priest mumbled over you while you held your breath, half praying, half pretending not to wonder whether you'd even be welcomed back. You were, but the look said more than the words. Some say illness clings to women like mist after birth. Some say too much grief makes you unlucky. There are women still whispered about long after their babies died. You think about that sometimes when eyes linger too long on your back in the pew. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that a woman who entered a holy place too soon after childbirth could cause the candles to flicker or milk to sour. Superstition blurred with doctrine and fear with tradition. Your daughter fidgets beside you trying to copy your bowed head, but too young to keep still. Your son picks at a loose thread on his sleeve, pretending not to be bored. You place a gentle hand on both their backs. Ground them, remind them. Outside the clouds shift. A shaft of pale sunlight breaks through the stained glass window, landing just at the feet of the Virgin statue near the altar. The baby stirs. Her hand rises and falls with your breath. You let your eyes linger on the colored light. You think about miracles. You don't expect them anymore. Not really, but still you show up. You kneel when you can. You mutter the prayers you half remember. You light the candle when the money allows. Because maybe it's not about belief. Maybe it's about rhythm, about showing up. You once heard a traveler, some monk passing through, say that heaven is a garden, not a palace. You like that. A garden you tend every day hoping something grows. You think of your children that way. Each one a seed in stubborn soil. You water them with sweat and tears and hope and lullabies. Sometimes they grow, sometimes they don't. And still you tend them. Your husband joins you near the end, muddy and winded. He nods to the priest, takes his place beside you, touches your arm briefly. No words, but the gesture is enough. You leave the chapel with your family in a quiet row. No one speaks. You walk past the gravestones, half swallowed by moss, names, faded dates guessed. One of them is yours. The little one. The one you buried last year. You never pass without touching the stone. Not out of grief, out of love, out of memory. Your daughter sees and does the same. She doesn't say why. She doesn't have to. Historians still argue whether women of your station had any real spiritual agency or were merely tools of piety dragged through ritual. But you know something the scholars don't. Faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up. Even when you're tired. Even when you doubt. Even when you're grieving. Especially then. You walk home with your children skipping ahead and your husband beside you, quiet but solid. The baby is heavy against your chest now, heavier with every week. That's good. That means she's eating, growing, surviving. You pass Marta's cottage. She waves. You wave back. She's carrying her newest, only a few months old. You exchange the same look, tired, wary, but still here. You walk the rest of the way with that same rhythm, mud underfoot. Weight on your hip. Hope stitched between each breath. Tonight the baby might cough again. The stew might be thin again. The fire might die too early. But today you lit a candle. You whispered a name. You were seen. And sometimes that's enough to keep going. It's washing day again. Which is to say it's the day you scrape mud out of stained tunics, chase lice from seams, and soak cloth in water so cold it makes your knuckles go white. The baby's swaddled to your back, sleepy but warm. Your daughter helps you carry the basket half empty because there's never enough spare clothing to call it laundry. Just shirts too crusted with dirt to ignore, and the occasional rag you dare to call a towel. You trudge to the stream that cuts behind the mill where the water runs fast and clear even in winter. The stones are slick with moss and frost, and already your toes are numb. Other women are there. You exchange nods, tighten your shawl, and begin. You kneel on cold earth, dip the first shirt, scrub, and scrub, and scrub. Mainstream historical fact. In the medieval world, laundry was a public and grueling task, typically done in rivers or communal washhouses, using homemade soap from animal fat and ash. Clothes weren't washed weekly, but only when visibly soiled or foul-smelling. Water was precious. Warm water a luxury. You use your own soap, a gray lump you boiled down weeks ago. It doesn't smell nice, but it cuts through grease well enough. You rub it into the cloth, beat the tunic against a flat stone, then rinse and wring. The process takes hours. Your daughter's hands are red. She works slowly but steadily, teeth clenched, lips blue. You want to tell her to go home, but you also want her to learn this, how to endure, how to keep moving when everything hurts. She'll need it someday. The baby coughs behind you. You feel it more than hear it, her little chest jerking against your spine. You shift her to your front, press your palm to her cheek. Not feverish, just cold. You wrap her tighter, kiss her forehead, and keep working. Nearby, Marta sings under her breath, a washing song half lullaby, half rhythm. You join her softly, letting the melody carry your body through the next set of strokes. You think of your mother's hands, how they cracked and bled in the same spot every winter, how she used to wrap them in cabbage leaves to soften them. You have the same crack now, the same ache in your wrists, and yet you keep going. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval women swore by washing their hands and faces in the first snow of the year. It was said to bring beauty and cleanse sin. Others saved wash water from childbirth to purify the floorboards of sick rooms. Practicality and belief blurred. Historians still argue whether these washing rituals were acts of sanitation or superstition. You've lived both. Sometimes you wash, not because it helps, but because it feels like fighting back. Like defiance. Like telling the dirt you will not win. The sun rises a little higher. A few birds flit past. A neighbor's dog watches from the ridge, wagging its tail slowly, its belly hollow with hunger. Your son would love to see the dog. He's always trying to make friends with strays. But he's home today, tending the fire, watching the pot, proving he's growing older. You wring out the last tunic and lay it across a bush to dry. It will smell like earth and ash, not flowers, but it will be clean. Enough. You stretch your back. It crackles like old timber. Your daughter does the same, grinning as if she's proud of the ache. You smile back, pride and pain tangled together, always. The baby is fussing now. She's hungry. You sit on a flat stone, unlace your bodice, and let her nurse. She latches on immediately, her little fists curling into your ribs. Her feet kick against your belly. She's warm again. You close your eyes for just a moment. Breathe. The other mothers are finishing up. They trade tips, gossip herbs warnings. A whisper about lice in the straw at the western stable. A rumor that the steward's cousin died of a chill that turned to fever. A new chant to soothe colic. You tuck those bits of wisdom away like coin. And when the baby is done and the bundle of wet cloth is gathered, you rise again. Slowly. Carefully. Your knees stiff, your arms raw. Your daughter already ahead of you, balancing the basket like it's a crown. Historians don't write about this part much. They write about kings, about plagues, about taxes and treaties. But they forget the women at the stream. The mothers who bend and scrub and sing. They forget that this too is history. You walk back with your arms full of clean clothes and your back full of weight. Your path winds through frost-bitten brambles, past the hollow tree where your children once pretended to be knights. You pass the spot where your daughter fell and scraped her knee last summer. You glance toward the gate where your husband sometimes waits with news of work. It's all the same world. One loop of labor and love and memory. The baby coos. The sun warms your neck. The steam will rise from your clean tunics tonight as they dry by the fire, and the smell will remind your children of safety. Of home. Of you. And even if no one ever writes your name or paints your portrait or sings a song in your memory, you were here. Your hands did this. Your body endured. Your love remains stitched into every thread. It's spring now, though the ground still feels cold underfoot, and the wind hasn't quite forgotten winter. But the frost has pulled back from the fields and the birds are returning. You can hear them in the mornings, thin, tentative songs, as if they're not quite sure it's safe yet. You understand that feeling. You wake early. Before the baby stirs, before your son begins poking the hearth, before your daughter sleepily reaches for the kindling. You lie in the dim light and listen to the breeze, nudging the shutters to the distant bleating of a lamb, to your own breath slower than usual. Then you rise, carefully, gratefully. The baby's chest moves in tiny, even pulses. She's made it through the dark season. You don't say it aloud, don't dare, but your fingers linger on her cheek longer than usual as you wrap her close and begin the day. There's planting to begin. The men will break soil today and the women will follow in a few weeks, tucking seeds into neat rows like whispered prayers. You remember doing that last year, bellyful, with child fingers cracked and bleeding. Each seed was a promise you barely believed in. Some of them grew, most didn't, but you kept planting. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval peasant life, spring wasn't a moment of joy, it was a second test. Winter might have starved your pantry, but spring could still kill your future. A single bad planting meant another year of hunger. Every sprouting shoot mattered. You stand in the doorway for a moment, the baby slung against your chest, and watch the sky. Gray as always, but softer. There's a feel to it like the earth is exhaling just a little. Your son stumbles out after you, eyes still puffy with sleep hair, wild as a haystack. He rubs his nose on his sleeve and says, "Is it warm yet?" You shrug, warmer than yesterday. He nods like that's good enough, and it is. Your daughter brings out the broom and begins sweeping the threshold, just as your mother taught you. You don't ask her to. She just does it now. Later, you'll clean the hearth again. Shake out the blankets, wash the baby's tunic, and maybe if there's time, you'll sew a new patch onto your husband's sleeve. He tore it, stacking wood. Again. You've patched that spot 3 times already. You'll patch it 3 more if you have to. Because that's what you do. You hold things together. Not just cloth and wood and meals, but people. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval mothers buried their children's first lost tooth under a stone by the doorway to tie their soul to the earth. Others sewed tiny charms into the hems of spring clothing. Bits of bone pressed flowers, dried berries to ward off illness and mischief. You found a clover yesterday, 3 leaves perfect. You pressed it between 2 pages of your prayer book. Not because you're superstitious, but because... maybe. Historians still argue whether peasant women lived passive lives or wielded quiet power, shaping the rhythms of survival, the structure of homes, the emotional glue of entire villages. You've never needed an answer. You already know. When the well overflows, you're the one who gathers the buckets. When the animals give birth too early, you're the one who warms the calves. When a neighbor breaks her ankle, it's your daughter they send with broth. When someone dies, it's you who weeps loudest at the grave, then brings stew the next night. And when your baby took her first step last week, it was your hands she reached for. You didn't cry then, but you did later alone by the fire. Because it meant something. Because it meant she's not a baby forever. Because it meant despite all odds, you kept her breathing long enough to try walking. Tonight, your family will eat stew again. Lentils mostly with onion and a scrap of meat from the festival. It's not much, but the pot is full. Your son will ask for seconds. Your daughter will clean the bowls without being asked. The baby will smear lentils on her forehead and grin like a queen. You'll laugh. And when the fire burns low and your husband reaches for your hand, not with words, just with warmth, you'll feel it again. Not joy, not peace, something quieter. Endurance. Love in the shape of repetition. A life stitched together from hard days and soft glances. You never got to dream big. You never learned to read more than your prayers. You never left this village. Probably never will. But you've raised 3 children in a world where children don't always make it to spring. You've sung lullabies over fevers. You've scraped frost from window slats with bare hands. You've stitched, stirred, soothed, and stayed. And as you lie down tonight, baby, warm against your ribs fire, whispering its last breath, you think, I'm still here. And for one more day, so are they. So here you are curled in the dark, breathing, slow eyes heavy. You've walked in her footsteps, felt the cold seep through her floor, smelled the smoke curling from her hearth. You've held her baby close against your chest and whispered old prayers into the night. You've bent over frozen earth and boiling pots. You've listened for coughs in the quiet. You've watched the faces of your children by firelight and wondered how many more winters you'll get with them. You've carried more than baskets. You've carried everyone. And yet you never made history books. No statues, no poems, no names etched into stone. Just the quiet truth of survival and the tender, unrelenting courage of a mother who stayed. If you're still awake, let the stillness settle around you now. The story's done. The fire's low. The baby's breathing easy. The village is silent. And you've earned your rest.